Hey guys, tonight we're heading somewhere your smartphone wouldn't dare, right into the sticky, crowded heart of a medieval town square, where the best show in town isn't on a stage or screen, but swinging, kicking and gasping for life on the end of a rope. That's right. Welcome to Public Execution Day, family friendly, bring the kids, snacks optional, but strongly encouraged. If you thought your last trip to the mall was wild, you probably won't survive this. No, really. Forget the popcorn. Here, the drama is real, the crowd is rowdy, and live entertainment takes on a whole new, gruesome meaning. So before we go any further, if this quiet space makes you feel even a little less alone, you can like the video and subscribe, but only if it feels right to your heart. And hey, I love seeing where everyone's watching from. Drop your location and local time in the comments. Are you curled up in Texas at midnight, or listening from a rainy city in Norway, morning coffee in hand? It's kind of amazing to imagine all of us gathering for this weird wandering journey through history. Now dim the lights, let your shoulders relax, and let's begin tonight's slow, strange journey, together, here on Timeless Sleep. You stretch, rub your eyes, and listen for the telltale signs. Bells tolling, not for mass or market, but in slow, measured beats that announce something different. A public execution. It's a rhythm you know, and the town knows deep in your bones. The crows seem to know too. They're already circling overhead, drawn by some instinct that tells them today might end with a feast, if you catch my drift. You throw on your thickest tunic, tuck your child's hand in yours, and head out into the half-light. The whole village pulses with a nervous, almost festive energy. Neighbours greet each other with tight-lipped grins or wary glances. Even the animals seem restless, goats pulling at their tethers, a stray dog weaving through legs in search of dropped treats, or something less savoury. There's mud everywhere, a cold damp that clings to your boots and seeps through the cracks. Merchants are already setting up carts on the fringes, hawking everything from warm chestnuts and crumbly oatcakes to, believe it or not, souvenir tokens. Painted wood chips that say, "I was there." And yes, these are real. You spot a neighbour with one tied around her neck. Apparently it's supposed to ward off nightmares. Sure, let's go with that. As you draw closer to the square, you catch the sour sweet scent of spilled ale, wood smoke, and something unmistakably metallic. Blood, from the last animal slaughter maybe, or just the memory of violence clinging to the boards of the gallows. The platform rises above the heads of the crowd, rough-hewn and freshly hammered together, creaking under its own weight. Someone tried to sweep the square, but between the manure, straw and general detritus of medieval life, it's a losing battle. A small miracle if you manage to keep your cloak clean, let alone your soul. Here's the thing. In your world, entertainment means escape. Here, it's confrontation. There's no veil between you and suffering, no glass, no distance, no special effects. The condemned is just another person from your town, the butcher's son maybe caught stealing, or the stranger who got into a fight with the reeve and lost badly. Sometimes it's political, sometimes personal. The crowd shuffles and cranes for a better view, children hoisted onto shoulders, old women leaning on canes, whispering prayers or curses. The town crier, in his stained robe, stands on a barrel and clears his throat. He reads the charges aloud, his voice echoing over the restless bodies. Theft, murder, blasphemy, treason. The words are heavy, final, like stones dropping into a deep well. Sometimes if the mood strikes him, or if he's had a bit too much to drink, he embellishes the story, adding flourishes that make the criminal seem even more monstrous or pitiable, depending on which way the political winds are blowing. Historians still argue whether these recitations were meant to deter crime, or just make the show juicier for the crowd. The condemned is dragged forward, hands bound, head down, or held defiantly high. Sometimes they cry, sometimes they curse, and sometimes, most chilling of all, they smile. There's always a moment as the noose is slipped over the head, when the world seems to pause. You can hear your own heartbeat. Maybe you squeeze your child's hand or cross yourself, or just hope the next part goes quickly. The executioner is a local, almost never the masked figure of Hollywood legend. More often, he's the same guy who sharpens knives at the market or slaughters pigs for the winter feast. There's a weird mix of respect and revulsion around him. People keep their distance, but nobody wants his job. Sometimes he's even paid a bonus to do it right, because a botched hanging is the kind of story that gets told for years. Too short a drop and it's slow, agonising. Too long and, well, let's just say heads have been known to pop off like corks from wine bottles. And yes, there are always bets placed on how clean the job will be. Here's a bit of local colour. The kids, they're everywhere, peering through legs, climbing onto barrels and crates, laughing and jeering and sometimes bursting into song. It sounds unbelievable, but records exist, children chanting cheerful little rhymes at the foot of the gallows. Ring Around the Roses, but with darker lyrics. There's a weird sense of festival here, the blurring of horror and holiday, morality and mischief. One documented chant went, "Hangman, hangman, quick and neat, swing him up and watch his feet. If you're feeling uneasy, join the club. Vendors take advantage too. Meat pies are for sale, though they're cold and chewy by now. Someone's got hot wine steaming in a battered pot, the spices barely masking the sourness. There are even sweet treats, tiny candied nuts for children who don't seem remotely disturbed by what's happening 10 feet away. You buy some out of habit, half watching as your neighbour wipes her hands on her apron and tries to quiet a wailing baby. It's not always simple. The crowd is a living thing, with moods that shift and surge. Sometimes when the criminal is well known, beloved or simply pitiful, you hear cries for mercy. Sometimes the Lord listens and a pardon is delivered at the last possible moment to gasps and cheers. Other times the mercy never comes. You watch as the trapdoor swings open, the rope jerks taut, and it's over if you're lucky. If not, the condemned kicks and twists, legs thrashing, face going purple as the crowd murmurs. In rare cases, the executioner has to pull on the legs, trying to speed up the process. The lucky ones pass out quickly, the unlucky linger, eyes rolling, lips mouthing prayers or curses. This is where things get even stranger. After the hanging, some people rush forward, not to help but to collect souvenirs. A drop of blood on a kerchief, a scrap of the rope, a sliver of wood from the gallows, each believed to have magical properties. You see a woman holding her kerchief up to the body's face, hoping to catch a drop of martyr's blood. Others mutter about relics, healing fevers, warding off evil spirits. Fringe beliefs sure, but try telling that to a mother with a sick child at home. For some, this isn't just spectacle, it's community. You see people making deals, exchanging gossip, even arranging marriages on the sidelines. There are jokes told at the expense of the condemned, or the executioner, or the reeve. He swung faster than his debts, someone mutters, and there's a ripple of laughter. You even hear a new nickname for a neighbour, Nooseneck Ned. In a world where life is short and brutal, humour has to be quick and sharp. And then there are the scholars standing at the edge of the square, whispering theories about crime and punishment, about the power of public rituals to reinforce authority. They debate whether these executions really deter criminals, or just give everyone a chance to vent their fear and anger in a safe, controlled way. One day, perhaps, they'll write books about this. For now, you watch them scribbling notes on scraps of parchment, careful not to look too interested. Nobody likes a know-it-all. Every now and then, the spectacle goes wrong. A friend tells you about a hanging in another town where the platform collapsed and dropped 3 people into the muck. 2 of them not even criminals, just unlucky onlookers. Or the time someone survived the drop, gasping and flailing until a priest intervened and claimed it was a miracle. Historians still argue whether that counted as divine intervention or just shoddy construction. By noon, the energy has shifted. The execution is over. The body might be left hanging as a warning, or carted away quickly if the family pays the fee. People drift back to their lives, stopping for one last treat or a quick game of dice. Kids reenact the hanging with sticks and strings, making you wonder what lessons they're really learning. A dog sniffs around the base of the platform, Hopeful but mostly ignored. If you stay a little longer, you'll notice how quickly everything returns to normal. The market opens up, voices rise in gossip, and the next event is already being planned. There's talk of a bear baiting next week, a chance to see dogs and bears fight if the bear survives the journey from the next town. If not, there's always a wrestling match, or a puppet show, or, rumour has it, a mummer's play with actual devils. You try to shake off the chill of the morning, but the images linger. The swinging body, the jeering crowd, the odd mingling of horror and celebration. One last oddity before you leave. You spot a local priest dipping his finger in a cup of wine and crossing himself. Is it for the condemned, or for himself? Nobody asks. The bells toll again, and life, as always, moves on. So you trudge home, boots caked in mud, and your mind crowded with sights and sounds you'll be unpacking for days. Was this justice? Was it entertainment? Was it just another day in the medieval world where life and death dance together in the public square and nobody ever really knows where the line is? The only certainty is this: you'll be back the next time, because there's nothing else quite like it. You know how in your world people talk about animal rights, and the closest you get to seeing a wild creature is a zoo trip or a viral dog video? Forget that. You're living in a world where the hottest ticket in town, besides a hanging, is bear baiting, and if you think that sounds like something gentle, you're about to be spectacularly disappointed. Welcome to an afternoon of medieval fun that's less National Geographic and more animal mayhem with a dash of betting, blood and questionable fashion choices. It's the weekend, and the entire town is buzzing. The rumour mill's been working overtime. A travelling show has arrived, bringing with it a massive roaring bear named Old Gregory, and a pack of dogs as tough as rusty nails. Is not every day you see a real bear, unless you count the guy who passed out in the tavern last night, but let's be honest, his growl was more snore than terror. You push through the morning fog to the green just outside the town walls. There's a rough wooden ring hastily fenced off, surrounded by cheering, jeering villagers. The air smells like trampled grass, sweat, and roasted onions from a nearby vendor. Every dog in town seems to be barking, each trying to outdo the next, and there's an undercurrent of laughter and nervous excitement. Even the chickens seem ruffled, literally. There's Old Gregory, a hulking brown beast chained by the neck to a thick stake in the centre of the ring. He paces in circles, nose twitching, eyes rolling, as if he knows exactly what's coming. On the other side, a handful of men in stained jerkins argue over which of their dogs is the bravest, the quickest, the least likely to run away at the sight of those claws. You can't help but notice the irony. Grown men boasting about their pets, as if they're all lords in waiting. One guy, probably after a little too much ale, claims his dog once scared a wolf. "A wolf?" his friend snorts. "Last week he was scared by a goose." The crowd erupts into laughter. Because yes, geese are a thing here too. If you thought the day was just about bear baiting, think again. Some people can't afford a dog or a bear, but everyone can afford a goose. And so, on the edges of the bear ring, there's another competition brewing. The infamous goose race. Dozens of geese, each with a coloured ribbon tied around its neck, honk their way down a muddy track, as children and grown men alike place their bets. The winner? Usually whichever goose decides to run toward the finish line instead of wandering off to nibble a bit of bread from an onlooker. Historians still argue whether these races were meant as comic relief, or if they genuinely started as a serious attempt to breed the world's fastest goose. You look around and realise how much the entire town has invested in this spectacle. There are stalls selling roasted nuts, cups of weak ale, and the ever-present mystery pies, which, based on the flavour, might be better suited for throwing than eating. The local blacksmith is there, holding court with his buddies, and even the reeve, always looking for trouble, has a grin on his usually sour face. There's an old woman with a basket full of apples, claiming that feeding one to the bear will bring good luck, though given the bear's current mood, you're not sure luck is the word for what he'll bring. The bear baiting itself is a study in controlled chaos. The dogs are loosed, one at a time or sometimes in pairs, to charge the bear, The bravest, meaning the most foolhardy, rush in, barking and snapping. Old Gregory rises on his hind legs, swiping with a paw that could crush a man's skull. Sometimes the dogs nip at his heels, sometimes at his nose. Sometimes a dog actually manages to land a bite, and the crowd cheers. More often the bear swats, and a dog goes tumbling, tail between legs. The excitement is so high you almost forget you're watching something so brutal. It'd get you arrested in the modern world. But here, this is high drama. The betting is fierce, coins fly, insults too. The old woman next to you throws her hands up and shouts, "That's my nephew's dog! Come on, Buttons!" The dog, as if sensing the moment, promptly sits down and scratches an ear to universal groans. There's always that one person in the crowd, maybe it's you today, who's a bit uneasy about the whole thing. Maybe you start thinking about the bear's life, captured as a cub, hauled from village to village, prodded and poked by handlers. Or maybe you look at the dogs, bred for aggression but also for loyalty, and wonder if they know this isn't a real fight. But then the crowd surges and cheers, and you're swept back up in the chaos. Every so often there's an accident. A dog gets too close and is crushed under a paw, or the bear manages to yank the stake loose, and there's a moment of pure panic as everyone scrambles backward, shrieking and shoving. Local legend has it that in the next village over, a bear once escaped entirely, leading the town on a wild chase that ended in the Lord's kitchen. Historians still debate whether the bear was really after the pantry or just looking for a little peace and quiet. The day isn't all violence though, at least not the way you'd expect. Between rounds there are clowns and minstrels, jugglers tossing knives and balls and sometimes even flaming sticks. The minstrels sing songs, mostly bawdy, some political, all catchy enough to get stuck in your head for weeks. There's a jester who, legend claims, once convinced a bear to wear a hat and dance on its hind legs for a crust of bread. Did this actually happen? Historians aren't sure, some say it's just a tavern tale. Here's where the geese come back into the story. After the bear baiting, when the crowd is either sated or vaguely traumatised, the geese are herded onto the makeshift track for their moment of glory. Children shriek and wave, grown men shout encouragement or threats, and the geese, utterly unimpressed, mostly waddle in the wrong direction. Betting on geese is both a comic relief and a serious business. The winner sometimes takes home a few coins or just the honour of saying their goose wasn't completely useless. If you're lucky, there's even a goose plucking contest, an event as horrifying as it sounds. The object? Pluck as many feathers as you can from a live goose in a set time, without getting bitten. You win. Well, you win feathers, which can be used for quills, pillows, and presumably as tokens of questionable pride. Children sometimes participate, and if that sounds odd, remember, there's not much in the way of Saturday morning cartoons out here. The crowd thins as the afternoon fades. The bear, if he survived, is chained up and led away, already a legend in the next village's rumour mill. The bravest dog is paraded around the tavern that night, draped with a garland of flowers, or, if the owner is particularly sentimental, a battered old sock. The geese? They're mostly eaten. The feathers are gathered up for sale at the next fair. One thing about medieval entertainment, it's communal. You're never alone. There's always someone to laugh with, bet against, or commiserate with when your goose comes in last. There's a peculiar intimacy to the shared spectacle, a sense that, for better or worse, this is your tribe, your world. You can almost forget the mud, the bruises, and the lingering smell of bear. Now, if you're the sort who likes to look for meaning in chaos, you might notice how bear baiting serves as a weird, violent glue for the community. Everyone, from the lord's daughter to the stable boy, gets swept up in the contest. Jokes are traded. Rivalries are born and resolved. Stories grow with every telling. Remember the year old Gregory almost ate the mayor? Did you see how that goose outran the smith's dog? The events become local legends, retold at firesides and in taverns, shaping the memory of the place. Of course, not everyone loves it. There are those who grumble that it's cruel, that it encourages violence, that the world is getting a little too wild. There are even a few who whisper that someday, someone's going to get hurt. Historians still argue whether these dissenters were a true force for change or just the killjoys of their day. But as the sun sinks and the shadows grow long, you realise you're part of a story much older and stranger than you imagined. You came for the show. You leave with a dozen stories, a belly full of pie of questionable provenance, and the kind of memories that stick to you like mud. And somewhere, in the quiet of the evening, you can still hear the echoes, the roar of the bear, the honk of the geese, the laughter and the shouts. You walk home through the muddy streets, tired but buzzing, and maybe, just maybe, you wonder what next week's entertainment will bring. You wake the next morning with sore feet, a hoarse voice from cheering or booing at the bear baiting, and mud still clinging to your boots. But there's little time to rest in a medieval town where the calendar is packed with holy days, feast days, and, if you're lucky, or unlucky, an invitation to one of those famous noble banquets. If you imagine candlelit halls, gentle music, and a dignified meal, prepare to be disappointed, or maybe entertained. Because the truth is, medieval feasts are legendary not just for excess, but for their blend of weird, wild, and, frankly, gross. Let's set the scene. It's evening. The sun dips low behind stone towers and smoke spirals from chimneys across the town. The noble's manor, cold, draughty, and smelling of wet dog, glows with torchlight and anticipation. You and a few dozen other guests have been summoned for a grand meal to celebrate a victory, a marriage, or just because the Lord is bored and wants to show off. There's no RSVP. If you're invited, you come. If not, you hear about it for weeks. The manor's great hall is huge, but the heat comes mostly from bodies pressed shoulder to shoulder and a fire that smokes more than it warms. Reed mats crunch under your feet. They've been sprinkled with herbs, but mostly serve to soak up spilled ale and whatever else might hit the floor before the night's done. The walls are draped with faded tapestries, more for insulation than art. If you squint, you can see scenes of long-ago battles, saints, or maybe just a bunch of dogs chasing a very distressed pig. You squeeze onto a bench at a trestle table, elbow to elbow with farmers, soldiers, and minor nobles. Table manners? Let's just say they're optional. You use your knife for everything. Cutting, scooping, sometimes even as a toothpick if no one's looking. Forks haven't really caught on. If you have one, it's probably seen as suspicious or even unchristian. Instead, you tear hunks of bread to mop up sauce, and if you drop a chunk, you weigh whether the 3-second rule applies to a straw-strewn floor. Here's your first test, the napkin. In theory, the nobility use fine linen napkins. In practice, you're just as likely to see someone wipe their hands on their sleeve, the edge of the tablecloth, or, more colourfully, the dog snoozing under the table. Dogs are everywhere, weaving through legs in search of scraps, occasionally barking in protest when someone steps on their tail. There's a whole etiquette to it. If the Lord's favourite hound sits next to you, don't even think about sneaking a bone. And then the food arrives, carried in by servants who look more exhausted with each trip. Forget small plates and delicate portions, trays heaped with roasted meats, boar, venison, goose, and occasionally something mysterious, clatter down the table. There's bread, blackened at the edges, and a massive wheel of cheese so hard you could probably use it as a shield. Bowls of stewed vegetables fragrant with garlic and herbs steam beside pies stuffed with, well, let's hope it's pork. The star of the show is always the meat, roasted whole, shiny with glaze, sometimes with the head still attached. The boar's mouth is stuffed with apples, the bird's feathers are artfully stuck back in for presentation. You tear at the food with your hands, ripping apart drumsticks and gnawing on ribs. Cutlery is for the wealthy, and even they aren't shy about getting greasy. Here's a mainstream historical fact. Spices are everywhere, and not just for flavour. They used to mask the taste of meat that's, let's say, a little past its prime. Salted, smoked and spiced, medieval cooks work hard to keep everything edible. But sometimes a strange tang or odd crunch. Is that a tooth? Or just a stone? Tells you this beast has been on a journey. And now for the weird. Forget polite conversation or careful eating. The true entertainment here is what you might call table games. Nose-picking, for example, is both frowned upon and impossible to avoid. Someone always manages to find the loudest, wettest sneeze at just the wrong moment. There are stories, well attested by chroniclers, of nobles using the tablecloth as a communal handkerchief, or spitting bones onto the floor for the dogs to fight over. If you're squeamish, this is where you might lose your appetite. If not, you're just getting started. The wine flows, thin, sour, but better than water, which is likely to give you a stomachache. Ale is served in wooden mugs. Someone inevitably drinks too much, starts a song, and then a story, and before long you're laughing at tales of drunken mishaps and midnight escapades. Here's where the night gets especially lively. Drinking games. Who can chug the fastest? Who can burp the loudest? There's even a record. Somewhere in England, a monk was said to have burped so forcefully that a candle snuffed out across the room. Historians still argue whether this was a miracle or just a very unfortunate draught. The entertainment isn't just eating and drinking. There's music, lutes, fiddles, drums. Minstrels stroll up and down, sometimes singing bawdy ballads, sometimes reciting epic tales. If you're lucky, there's a jester, and this one's famous for his juggling and for impersonating the Lord's mother. Risky, but so far he's survived. More on jesters later. Sometimes a noble wants to show off the latest trend from France or Italy, and you're treated to a subtlety, an elaborate food sculpture made of marzipan, sugar or dyed bread. One memorable feast features a castle made of pastry, with little sugar knights doing battle. Children shriek with laughter. Adults wager on which knight will win before someone eats them. Not exactly the Great British Bake Off, but a showstopper in its own right. Of course, where there's food, there's gossip. You listen as two women debate whether the Lord's new wife is actually a distant cousin, or just a girl from the next shire with a good dowry. Someone else insists the meat tastes a bit different. It's swan, the server assures you, though you swear you saw a rabbit in the kitchens. If you're clever, you know not to ask too many questions. Some things are better left to mystery, like what's really in the pie, or why the cook's got a black eye. Fringe fact, at some banquets the real contest isn't the food, but the table manners. There's a game, popular with young squires, called Who Can Eat the Most and Look the Least Sick. The winner gets bragging rights, and sometimes a stomachache that lasts until Lent. The air grows thick with noise and heat. Trenchers, thick slabs of stale bread used as plates, soak up gravy and drool. At the end of the meal, the poorest guests gather them up, eating what's left, including any drippings, bones, or occasionally a tooth that worked itself loose mid-chew. Now, here's a moment of pure medieval flavour. The after-dinner entertainment. Maybe it's a farting contest. Yes, you heard that right. There's a whole tradition of jester's airs where the best or worst flatulence wins a coin or a kiss from the cook. If you're truly unlucky, you'll witness a nose-picking duel. First to find, well, something substantial wins. Hygiene is a work in progress. Amidst all this, the Lord might rise and propose a toast. Glasses are raised and the whole room joins in, whether they have wine, ale, or just water flavoured with honey and herbs. The toast is rarely just to health. It's to victory and to love, to the Queen's new shoes, or to surviving another winter. You join in, the warm glow of food and drink dulling the sharper edges of the day. Of course, there's always risk at these banquets. An ill-timed joke, a spilled drink, or a little too much candour can mean trouble. You remember last year's feast, when a guest insulted the Lord's choice of cheese. The silence was so heavy you could hear a mouse burp. The guest later found himself assigned to latrine duty for a month. Lesson learned. Historians still debate whether these wild, weird feasts brought people together or drove them further apart. Was it the food, the drink, or the shared experience of enduring several hours of chaos, discomfort, and impromptu competitions that built community? Or was it just a chance for the powerful to remind everyone who really owned the biggest wheel of cheese? By midnight, the hall is a mess. The fire has burned low. Most guests stumble out, laughing or groaning into the cold night. A few linger to finish the last of the ale or swap stories with the minstrels. The dogs have made off with whatever bones they could snatch, and the servants eye the leftovers, dreaming of breakfast. You make your way home through dark, twisting streets, the night air sharp and bracing after the smoky warmth of the hall. You're full, tired, and a little unsteady. The taste of roast boar and oversalted pie lingers on your tongue, mixed with memories of laughter, song, and the echoing burp that will surely go down in town legend. As you slip into bed, you wonder what tomorrow will bring. A day of peace, or another excuse for the whole town to come together for food, drink, and a contest to see who can gross out the neighbours the fastest. In the medieval world, entertainment never really stops, it just changes flavour. You wake up with a headache. Maybe from the overspiced wine, maybe from the snoring jester you somehow ended up sharing a bench with. Outside, the sun slants in through shuttered windows, cutting through the smoke haze left over from the feast. Your tunic smells like spilled gravy and sweat, but there's no time to rest. Today promises another kind of medieval spectacle, one even stranger than bear baiting, messier than a feast, and much, much riskier if you happen to be the star. It's time for the Fool's Hour. Jesters, with their jangling caps and sharp tongues, rule the court for a few precious moments, and you're in the front row. The castle's main hall looks different in the light of day, but there's still a buzz of expectation. People gather, nobles lounging on embroidered cushions, servants pretending not to eavesdrop, and the Lord himself sprawled on a dais, nursing a hangover that could floor an ox. The jester, though, is ready. He's always ready. In a world without comedians, late-night TV, or even newspapers, this man, sometimes a woman or even a pair, holds a strange, precarious power. He's here to make you laugh, groan, and, if he's clever, forget for a moment that you're living in an age where chamber pots are emptied out of windows. Jesters don't look like anyone else. You spot him straight away. Garish mismatched clothes, striped tights, shoes with bells, a cap with 3 tails, each ending in a tiny battered bauble. His face might be painted or streaked with mud, his grin lopsided, eyes always watching for the next target. He carries a bladder on a stick, a wooden bauble, or sometimes a live chicken, just for the effect. There's a ripple through the crowd when he enters. People sit up straighter, mothers pull children close, and the Lord's lips twitch in anticipation. The jester is both entertainment and a kind of living, walking question. What is he going to do today? Today's performance begins with juggling. Knives, apples, burning sticks. Never all at once, at least not if he wants to keep his eyebrows. The children gasp and squeal, and even the adults can't help but clap when he balances 3 wooden spoons on his nose. But that's just the warm-up. The real draw is the banter. The jester mocks everyone, from the Lord's new haircut to the Reeve's chronic flatulence. He throws in impressions. Honestly, his imitation of the bishop's lisp is legendary, and always watches the crowd for signs of offence. And then come the jokes that straddle the line between brave and suicidal. My lord's wisdom is like a well, deep, dark, and usually full of frogs. Laughter erupts, but there's a pause, a collective breath. If the Lord laughs, everyone laughs. If not, the tension is thick enough to cut with a butter knife. Some lords adore a good roasting, others less so. Historians still argue whether jesters truly had license to speak truth to power, or whether they just gambled with their necks every time they opened their mouths. Of course, not every joke is clever. Sometimes when words fail or the mood grows too grim, the jester falls back on a classic, bodily humour. Fart jokes are his bread and butter. He'll imitate the sound with his mouth, his hands, even a pig's bladder if the acoustics are right. He'll juggle apples and then accidentally drop one, causing it to roll under the Lord's foot just as he stands. Oops, down he goes. To be fair, the jester claims this was an accident, but the kitchen staff all swear it's the 3rd time this month. In some courts, the jester can't resist sneaking a whoopee cushion, well, the medieval equivalent, onto someone's seat. You haven't truly lived until you've watched a highborn lady leap to her feet, face scarlet as the hall erupts in laughter. Every so often, the jester gets too bold. Maybe he teases a guest who's already on edge, or lampoons a local bishop in earshot of the bishop's right-hand man. There's always a moment, a sharp intake of breath, where you think, did he just go too far? Sometimes a lord will laugh it off. Sometimes the jester is simply ignored, which in its own way is a kind of punishment. And sometimes, rarely but memorably, the fool crosses the invisible line. That's when the jest stops being a joke. One famous incident, you overheard the story at last night's feast and you can't tell if it's true or just another tall tale, involves a jester in Burgundy who made fun of a royal's new boots. The boots, he quipped, were big enough for two but empty as their owner's head. The hall roared, the prince fumed, and, so the story goes, the jester spent the next month in the stocks, wearing those same boots for all to see. Whether this was clever punishment or just petty revenge, historians still argue. But for every jester punished, there are tales of fools who outlasted entire dynasties. They're secret, knowing just how far to go and when to switch from satire to slapstick. The jester's act is a dance, 1 foot in truth, 1 foot in absurdity, both feet ready to run. And it isn't all about jokes. Jesters are often musicians, acrobats, dancers, and, when needed, unofficial messengers. They carry news between villages, serve as go-betweens for lords and ladies, and sometimes even offer advice behind closed doors. The wise jester isn't just funny. He's a master of reading a room, of knowing whose secret to keep and whose to reveal. Some even say a clever fool can save a life with a well-timed jest, diffusing tension before it turns to bloodshed. Let's not forget the lawsuits. Yes, lawsuits. In more than one instance, a noble offended by a jest sued the performer for slander. There are court records, real, dusty parchments, where jesters are summoned to explain themselves before a magistrate. One infamous case involved a jester who imitated a bishop's limp during a festival. The bishop was not amused. The fool defended himself with another joke. I thought God made all men equal. I'm just trying to walk in his image. And the town, loving the spectacle, paid his fine for him. Here's a fringe tidbit. Some jesters, especially in the German states, doubled as unofficial spies. They overheard gossip, caught stray conversations, and reported back to their patrons. It's said that the motley was the best disguise of all. You could slip in and out of noble circles, and everyone assumed you were too silly to remember anything important. But jesters remembered everything. Children idolize these performers. When the act is over, you see the youngest sneak up, hoping to borrow a jester's cap or try out a somersault. There are always a few broken noses each festival, but no one seems to mind. The lord's daughter might try juggling apples, the stable boy will practice his best fart noise, and everyone leaves a little bolder, and for the moment, a little less worried about tomorrow. As the morning's performance ends, the jester bows, sweeping his hat nearly to the floor. The applause is raucous. Someone throws a crust of bread, another tosses a copper coin, and the jester winks as he catches both in one hand. He calls out, "A fool's thanks to all. May your sheep have twins and your chamber pot stay unspilled." The hall dissolves in laughter once more, but as you make your way out, you catch a glimpse of the jester slipping away, head bowed, his smile already fading. Behind the painted grin is a life as precarious as any. Too many jokes, the wrong audience, one grumpy lord, and the fool could find himself out in the cold, or worse. You leave the hall thoughtful, belly aching from laughter, but with a new respect for the tightrope walk that is a jester's life. In a world where so much is dangerous, unpredictable, and deadly serious, the jester is a strange kind of hero, living proof that laughter, even at its most dangerous, is as vital as bread. As you step into the afternoon light, you realise the castle is quieter now, but the town outside is gearing up for more fun. There are murmurs about a travelling miracle play rolling through, rumours of a wrestling match at sunset, and the tavern is already filling up with people eager to repeat the jester's best lines, plus a few jokes that never made it past the lord's ears. Your day isn't over. It's just another chapter in the endless wild tapestry of medieval entertainment, sometimes clever, sometimes crude, always unpredictable. The afternoon sun hangs heavy, sending golden shafts through the dust and haze as you make your way from the jester's performance toward the edge of town. There's a crowd gathering. Not in the market, not in the square, but around a line of rickety wooden wagons painted with crude scenes of angels, demons, and sword-waving saints. It can only mean one thing. The miracle play is in town. You feel that familiar ripple of excitement and dread, because these shows aren't like anything you'd catch on a modern stage. This is Bible meets blockbuster, with real fire, real peril, and the very real chance that someone's going to get hurt. Miracle plays, or mystery plays as some call them, are the Netflix series of the Middle Ages, multi-episode dramatizations of stories from scripture and legend, brought to life by townsfolk with more enthusiasm than training. You edge closer, joining the crowd of farmers, weavers, children with sticky hands, and noble ladies trying not to step in horse droppings. The whole town is here, hungry for a spectacle that's part sermon, part soap opera, and a little bit travelling circus. The wagons themselves form the makeshift stage. Each one holds a set. Heaven is painted in faded blue and gold. A wooden gate leads to hell, with actual smoke curling from a hidden brazier, and the Garden of Eden features a sad-looking apple tied to a string. You spot the devil, your neighbour's cousin if rumour is true, already in red face paint and a tail made from a length of frayed rope. The angel is a shoemaker's apprentice with pillow feathers stuck in his hair, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. There's a festival air, but also a note of danger. That's because miracle plays aren't just for fun. They're a living, breathing reminder of the consequences of sin, the terrors of hell, and the occasional slapstick fall from grace. The audience ranges from the devout, crossing themselves and muttering prayers as soon as Lucifer appears, to the barely restrained hecklers, teenage boys eager to see which prop will catch fire first. Today's drama starts with Adam and Eve. There's a hush as the actors step forward, reciting lines in a mixture of Latin, French, and the thick local dialect. You're not sure you catch every word, but you know the story. Temptation, the apple, the banishment. The serpent is an old, patched hosepipe draped over a broomstick, but the hiss is convincing enough to startle the little ones. Just as Eve bites into the apple, a gust of wind blows out the angel's candle, sending a plume of smoke up the devil's nose. He coughs, stumbles, and knocks over the fake tree. The crowd howls with laughter. The director, a bearded monk with the patience of a saint, waves frantically for them to carry on. That's medieval theatre. If something goes wrong, you improvise. The devil's next scene is legendary. His job is to terrify the audience, especially the children, and he takes it seriously. He leaps from the hellmouth wagon with a shriek, swinging a real blazing torch, sending the first 3 rows scattering. You clutch your child's hand a little tighter and edge away from the front just in case. The fire is real enough to singe eyebrows. More than one actor has lost a fringe or, on one memorable occasion, set their costume alight. Historians still argue whether these mishaps were part of the act or just the inevitable result of mixing theatre with pyrotechnics and wool tunics. The play moves on to the story of Noah's Ark. Here, the props department has outdone themselves. A cardboard dove on a stick, a wooden boat painted to look like it's floating, and a pair of goats borrowed from a neighbour's yard. There's a near disaster when one goat breaks loose, charging through the audience and upending the ark, but the crowd loves it. Some say these unscripted moments are the best part of the show. Next up, the crucifixion. It's sombre, even brutal, with the Roman soldiers, 2 burly millers in mismatched armour, banging away at the cross with enough force to worry the carpenters. The Christ is an apprentice blacksmith who takes his role to heart. He even added bruises with blackberry juice for extra realism. The audience falls silent as the scene unfolds, the only sound the sobs of a woman at the back, the actor's real mother, which gives the moment a strange authenticity. It's hard to believe, but sometimes the actors aren't just pretending. A famous chronicler tells of a time when the actor playing Christ actually fainted from heat and fear and had to be revived with ale behind the tomb. There are stories of actors falling off wagons, missing their cues, or getting too caught up in a sword fight. One memorable devil tripped over his own tail and tumbled into a basket of apples. Legend says the town talked about it for years. After the main play, there's an interlude. The monks who oversee the script let the local minstrels take over. This is when things get rowdy. Riddles are shouted, jokes exchanged, the bawdier the better, and sometimes, if the crowd's in the right mood, a puppet show involving devils, saints and a sheep or two. The Virgin Mary, played by a man in a blue veil to much ribald laughter, joins in, sometimes clearly tipsy on leftover communion wine. The miracle play always ends with a moral. The abbot steps forward, voice booming, "Repent! Remember the fate of those who sin." You nod, but you're mostly thinking about dinner, the ache in your legs, and the devil's impressive cartwheel. As the crowd disperses, you hear parents scolding their children begging for another penny to spend on honey cakes, and old men arguing about whether the angel really was drunk. As you turn to leave, you see the actors climbing down from the wagons, shaking hands and exchanging slaps on the back. A few are already talking about next year's performance, maybe with bigger fires, more elaborate costumes, or a new hellmouth that belches actual smoke. "Just so long as it doesn't set the mayor's beard alight again," someone mutters, and everyone laughs. The plays are more than just fun. They're glue that binds the community. You see the town's divisions soften, if only for a day. Lord and peasant, merchant and miller all pressed together, sweating and shouting, carried away by the drama. There's a lesson here, and not just the one the abbot intended. It's that in a world where life is hard, short and uncertain, you find joy wherever you can, even if it means risking singed eyebrows and splinters. As evening comes on, you and your neighbours drift back toward the heart of town. There's talk of another show tomorrow, this one a farce with even more slapstick and maybe, just maybe, a juggler who can balance a chicken on his head. You think back on the day, fire, laughter, a goat on the loose, and realise that for all its violence, weirdness and chaos, there's a wild beauty in the shared experience. And as you pass the wagons, the devil tips his hat, the angel gives a tired wink and you make your way home, soot in your hair and a story to tell for years to come. After a night spent replaying scenes of devils, angels and runaway goats in your head, you rise with the dawn to yet another day buzzing with anticipation. Word's out, the tournament is coming. Not just any tournament either. This one's for honour, gold and the chance to see your neighbour's teeth fly out of his mouth at 30 paces. Jousts, melees and the medieval version of extreme sports, where armour is only a suggestion and lawsuits are practically an afterthought. It's not long before you find yourself swept up in the preparation. The whole town has changed its rhythm to suit the grand event. Artisans hammer banners onto every gate. Children tie scraps of ribbon around their arms, pretending to be squires. At the edge of the field, enterprising vendors set up carts selling cider, salted nuts, greasy pasties, and, you guessed it, small blessed tokens said to protect from concussion. Historians still argue whether these tokens actually worked, or simply gave people the confidence to get closer to the action. As a guest, you've got choices. You can angle for a seat in the shaded stands, hoping a minor noble will mistake you for a distant cousin, or jostle with the crowds on the outer berms where you risk flying dirt, sweat, and on a bad day, the losing knight's helmet. Either way, you're in for a day of spectacle. The tournament field is enormous. On one side, pavilions stand in a row, each one draped with the heraldic colours of local lords and hopeful upstarts. You spot the bold blue and gold lion of Sir Geoffrey, a battered crimson boar belonging to the infamous Sir Allard, and several less impressive tents sporting stains that look suspiciously like last night's stew. Horses snort and stamp, tossing their heads as squires rush to adjust saddles and polish armour that's only shiny if you squint. The crowd surges and swells, and the air itself seems charged. There are shouts, laughter, the occasional scuffle as someone accuses someone else of stepping on their cloak. jokes are traded at the expense of nervous knights. If Sir Walter wins, I'll eat my own boot. And bets are laid on everything from who will win the day to who will fall off their horse first. One enterprising lad offers odds on whether anyone will end up in the nearby duck pond, armour and all. Before the action begins, there's the parade. Trumpeters, their cheeks puffed out and faces red, lead a procession of knights around the field. Banners stream, lances flash in the sunlight, and the crowd erupts in cheers and, let's be honest, the occasional rude gesture. The lady of the manor presides over the event, tossing flowers to her favourite knight and blushing only a little when he bows in return. You notice that half the flowers are wilted and one lands squarely on the head of a bewildered squire who wears it like a crown for the rest of the day. Now, the joust. You've heard stories, but nothing prepares you for the sheer violence of it. Two armoured figures face off across the field, lances raised, horses pawing the dirt. There's a moment of absolute silence. Everyone's holding their breath. Then a shout, a charge, and the thunder of hooves. Lances collide with shields, wood splinters, and sometimes the knights do too. A direct hit can unseat a rider, sending him tumbling to the ground, armour clattering, pride and possibly bones shattered. You wince at the first impact. The losing knight lies stunned while the victor circles, waving his lance and soaking up the applause. If you're lucky, the loser stands up, dusts himself off, and limps away. If not, the local barber surgeon is called over, grinning as he sharpens his knives. This, after all, is business. But the joust is only the beginning. The real chaos starts with the melee, a no-holds-barred team battle where rules are vague and honour often goes out the window. Dozens of knights, squires, and whoever else managed to borrow armour swarm the field, swinging wooden swords, axes, or whatever they could scrounge from the blacksmith. Helmets fly, shields splinter, and there's always someone yelling that they've been cheated. The crowd loves it, of course. People shout advice, hit him in the knees, cheer for favourites and jeer at anyone who runs away. If you're too close to the front, you might catch a stray shield or, worse, a fistful of mud. One time, a pig from a neighbouring farm escaped onto the field, causing more chaos than the knights themselves. The pig, by all accounts, won the day. Now for the quirky stuff. Medieval chroniclers recorded tournaments where the line between sport and war blurred almost to nothing. In one infamous event in France, rival factions turned a mock battle into a real one. Wooden swords replaced with steel, and what started as play ended with several corpses and the mayor hiding under a table. Historians still debate whether the violence was accidental or whether everyone was just looking for an excuse to settle old scores. But tournaments weren't only for knights. Between the headline events, you get sideshows, archery contests for the townsfolk, foot races for the children, even a pie-eating contest judged by the village priest, who has a suspiciously large appetite for blackcurrant tarts. If you're lucky, there's a troupe of travelling acrobats who perform flips and handstands on the edge of the field, collecting coins in their caps. Meanwhile, back in the stands, gossip is almost as fierce as the combat. You hear whispers about a squire caught stealing the lady's gloves, rumours about which knight secretly drinks watered wine, and endless debate about the legitimacy of Sir Geoffrey's lineage. His grandmother was a goose girl, one matron huffs, and don't let him tell you otherwise. Sometimes you suspect the real battles are happening right here in the crowd. As the day rolls on, the wounds pile up. A broken arm here, a dislocated shoulder there. The barber surgeon is in his element, bustling from one casualty to the next. He pulls out teeth, sets bones, and applies a mixture of honey and cobwebs to the worst cuts. It's a mess, but there's no shortage of volunteers. The knight who walks away with only a black eye counts himself lucky, and the loser, as always, gets a free lesson in humility and pain. For every victor there's a prize, maybe a purse of silver, a fine cloak, or a kiss from the lady of the manor, if she's in a generous mood. Sometimes the prize is simply surviving the day. You notice that the smart knights are already halfway to the ale tent before the last round is finished, eager to nurse their bruises with strong drink and even stronger stories. As dusk falls and the crowds drift homeward, You linger on the edge of the field, watching the squires chase chickens back into their pens and the local musicians tuning up for the post-tournament feast. Someone finds a lost helmet in the mud and raises it on a stick as a trophy. Children mimic the day's battles with sticks and shields of bark, screaming with delight every time someone topples over. The air smells of earth, sweat, and spilled cider. You realise as you wipe the dust from your eyes that tournaments are more than entertainment. They're a microcosm of the world, brutal, unpredictable, and always edging on the ridiculous. There's a wild, communal joy in seeing friends and strangers clash, in sharing stories of triumph and defeat, in knowing that for a few hours the world is united in chaos. And just when you think the excitement's over, a fight breaks out near the food stalls, two vendors arguing over who gets the best spot. The crowd surges once more, shouts rise, and a few knights, still in partial armour, are drawn in to keep the peace. In the end, the winner isn't the strongest, but the quickest to duck. Night settles in. The tournament field is a churned-up mess of mud, broken lances and lost ribbons. Fires are lit, and soon music drifts across the fields. There's another party brewing, because in the medieval world any excuse will do. You make your way home, legs aching, ears ringing with the day's cheers and taunts. You pass groups of revellers reenacting the best jousts in pantomime, a drunk knight serenading a horse, and a child dragging a makeshift shield twice his size. You smile, thinking back on the spectacle, a tapestry of violence and laughter, of honour and humiliation, all rolled into one. And as you crawl into bed, you wonder, who will win next year? Will you finally dare a front row seat? Or will you play it safe, watching from the shadows, content to witness the weird, wild theatre of the medieval tournament, where every man is a gambler, every woman a queen for a day, and everyone sooner or later takes a blow to the pride or the head. You awake the morning after the tournament with a dull ache in your muscles, a mix of too much cheering, standing, and maybe being accidentally elbowed during that last melee for a better view. Your mind races with memories of broken lances, flying mud, and that infamous knight who fell face first into the duck pond. Yet in the medieval world, there's always another form of entertainment lurking just around the corner, and today, it's not a knight or a noble, but you, or more precisely, all of you, caught up in the wild, frenzied, and utterly bizarre event known as the Dancing Plague. At first, the signs are subtle. You notice a handful of villagers in the marketplace, swaying to a rhythm no one else hears. It starts with a tap of the toe, a twitch of the hip. You joke that maybe last night's cider was stronger than you thought. But by midday, half the market square is alive with movement. Women in kerchiefs spinning in circles, children hopping from one foot to the other, old men clapping along. Even the stray dogs seem infected by the energy, chasing tails or barking in time. Historians still argue about the true cause of the dancing plague. Was it mass hysteria, a response to famine or fear, or something stranger like poisoned rye bread? Whatever the explanation, there's no denying the spectacle. At its height, the dancing is more than just fun. It's an outbreak, a compulsion, a contagious fever that sweeps through the town until the air itself seems to pulse and thrum. You're drawn in despite yourself. The music, such as it is provided by a ragtag group of fiddlers, drummers, and a boy with a pair of spoons. The beat is simple, but it works its way into your bones. Some people sing old folk songs, others just whoop and shout. You find yourself swept up in the tide, arms linked with friends and strangers alike, feet pounding the cobblestones, heart racing. At first, it's exhilarating. The whole town seems lighter, looser, more alive than ever before. You see the miller's wife, usually so stern, grinning as she twirls past the baker's boy. Children dart between adults, squealing with laughter. For a while, it's as if all the worries of the world, bad harvests, taxes, the threat of war, have been danced away. But as the hours drag on, exhaustion sets in. People begin to falter. Some collapse in the shade, gasping for breath, while others press on, their faces flushed, eyes wide and unfocused. Jokes start to fly. Dance like no one's watching, but everyone's watching and judging your footwork. One bold fellow claims he's invented a new move called the duck pond dive, inspired by last night's tournament disaster. The crowd howls, yet the atmosphere shifts from festive to frantic. The sun beats down, sweat pours, and the pounding of feet becomes almost desperate. Local priests gather at the edges, murmuring prayers, sprinkling holy water, and urging people to stop. But it's as if the town is under a spell. The music, the movement, the sheer momentum make it nearly impossible to break free. Here's a mainstream historical fact. Medieval Europe saw several outbreaks of dancing mania, most famously in Strasbourg in 1518, where hundreds danced uncontrollably, some for days on end. Chroniclers wrote of people dropping dead from exhaustion, of families forced to carry loved ones home, limp as rag dolls. Theories range from demonic possession to ergot poisoning, but no one could truly explain it. In your town, the dancing plague finally begins to wane as night falls. People collapse where they stand, on benches, against walls, even in the middle of the street. The fiddler's arms ache too much to go on. There are bruised feet, torn shoes, and at least 3 sprained ankles, 2 of them belonging to the same overeager tanner. Local healers move through the crowd with jugs of watered wine and handfuls of herbs. In the aftermath, everyone has a story. The old woman who claims she saw a vision of St. Vitus, patron saint of dancers and epileptics. The farmer who's convinced his cows now produce better milk thanks to the vibrations. The baker who swears he found a coin on the ground after every dance step. Fringe fact: in some towns, authorities hired professional musicians to play until the dancers dropped from exhaustion, hoping that structured music might bring the madness to a close. Historians still argue whether that worked, or just made things worse. As the days pass, the dancing plague becomes a new kind of legend. Children imitate the wildest moves, adults compare blisters, and everyone has a new respect for the mysterious forces that can seize a whole community. You wonder if it will happen again. If one day, out of nowhere, you'll find your feet tapping and your body whirling in the grip of something you can't control. The town, sore and weary, slowly returns to normal. Or at least as normal as medieval life allows. The market opens, the baker returns to his oven, and the only dancing is the polite slow shuffle of a couple at a wedding, or the joyous jig of children when the first apples ripen. But every so often when the fiddler tunes up, you catch the wary glance from a neighbour, and the half-joking, half-serious whisper, "Not again. Please, not again." It's a reminder that in your world, entertainment is sometimes a release, sometimes an escape, and sometimes, just sometimes, something deeper, stranger, and more mysterious than anyone can explain. But before you can recover, word spreads. The annual town fair is coming, and with it, a whole new set of spectacles that promise more laughs, more groans, and probably a few more bruises. The town fair isn't a single event, but a sprawling, chaotic festival that takes over every street, square, and alley. Stalls spring up overnight, offering everything from roasted chestnuts to miracle cures for warts. There's a strongman contest, really just who can lift the biggest rock, a pie-eating competition, and a greasy pole with a prize at the top. Usually a sack of flour or a string of sausages. Children run wild, chasing pigs or trying their hand at apple bobbing in barrels of questionable water. You drift through the fair, taking it all in. There's music everywhere, bagpipes, flutes, and the inevitable hurdy-gurdy. Acrobats tumble, fire eaters swallow torches, and jugglers balance everything from clubs to, occasionally, live chickens. You try your luck at a game of chance, tossing wooden rings onto pegs, only to lose your last coin to a grinning carny with suspiciously quick hands. At one corner you spot the singing barber. His tent is packed, the crowd roaring with laughter and delight. Inside, the barber, a man with a shock of red hair and a wicked grin, pulls teeth with one hand and strums a lute with the other. The song? A bawdy ballad about a miller's wife and her missing sheep. Every so often he punctuates the chorus with a dramatic flourish, yanking out a rotten molar, waving it in the air like a trophy, and depositing it in a bucket. You can't decide if it's more impressive or terrifying. "Next," he calls, and a nervous farmer shuffles forward, clutching a rag to his mouth. The barber launches into another verse, this one about a pious monk with an unholy appetite for goose pies, and with a quick twist, out comes another tooth. The crowd cheers, children gape, mothers grimace, and the bravest step up for a free song with their extraction. You join the laughter, even as you vow to brush your teeth extra well tonight. Fringe fact: travelling barbers in medieval Europe often doubled as minor surgeons, performing everything from tooth-pulling to bloodletting. Some even offered songs, jokes, or fortune-telling to distract their patients. Historians still debate whether these multitaskers were heroes, frauds, or simply the only medical option for miles around. Outside the barber's tent you pass a line of performers, mummers, minstrels, and a puppet master, whose devil marionette steals the show by biting a local priest's finger, to everyone's delight except the priest. A juggler sets a new town record by keeping 4 apples, 2 knives, and a cheese wheel in the air at once. Each act tries to outdo the last, and the air hums with competition. There's no shortage of physical contest either. At the wrestling pit, 2 burly men circle each other, bare feet digging into the mud. The crowd shouts encouragement and insults in equal measure. The rules are simple. First man to touch the ground loses. It's a test of strength, stamina, and sometimes sheer stubbornness. One match ends when both wrestlers collapse in a heap, too exhausted to rise, declared a draw, but the crowd insists both buy a round at the tavern. Of course, not all the contests are so friendly. There's the infamous Thumb War, an event where 2 combatants lock hands and battle to see who can pin the other's thumb first. The record is 6 minutes, set by a blacksmith with fingers like iron rods. Children challenge their elders, sometimes winning by surprise, and a few grown men take the contest a little too seriously, resulting in bruised knuckles and wounded pride. There are always accidents. Someone slips, someone falls, a barrel rolls loose and knocks over a stall. The laughter never stops. One year, a pig escapes the greased pole contest and leads half the town on a merry chase through the bakery, emerging dusted in flour and with a whole loaf clamped in its jaws. The baker, ever the good sport, declares it a sign of good luck for the coming harvest. By evening the fair is winding down, torches are lit, the air thick with the smell of roasting meat and spilled ale. You find yourself at the edge of the crowd, feet aching, sides sore from laughter. The singing barber, now hoarse, packs up his tools and waves you goodbye with a final flourish of his bloody rag. As you make your way home, you realise the day's entertainment has left you both exhausted and strangely uplifted. In a world so often defined by struggle and scarcity, the fair is a reminder that joy can be found in the most unexpected places, in a foolish dance, a sung-tooth extraction, or the triumphant chase of a runaway pig. You drift to sleep with the echoes of laughter, music, and the faint memory of your own wild dance steps, already dreaming of next year's fair. Morning sunlight drifts through your window, but it's laughter, not roosters, that pulls you from sleep. You rise, shake straw from your hair, and follow the noise. Today's mood is wild and festive. No sombre tournaments or frenzied dancing plague, but instead a full-blown animal trial, the kind of spectacle that proves medieval people really could turn anything into entertainment, especially when the law and the absurd overlapped. You step outside to find a crowd moving toward the church square, buzzing with rumour. A pig is to be tried for murder. Not a metaphorical pig, an actual pig, pink and muddy, and apparently guilty of a terrible crime. You squeeze between a barrel maker and a gaggle of giggling children. Even the town cats watch with interest, perched on windowsills and wagging their tails. This is no joke. In medieval Europe, animals were sometimes put on trial, prosecuted for everything from theft to murder. Today, the accused is a sow, who, according to official record, mauled a toddler when left unsupervised. The town bailiff leads her to a makeshift dock, really just a wooden crate, and ties a rope loosely around her neck. She snuffles, oblivious, while the crowd murmurs about whether she looks guilty or just hungry. Presiding over this strange court is the local magistrate, wearing a heavy robe and an even heavier expression. On either side are two attorneys. One, a serious-looking priest to argue for the prosecution, and the other, a local farmer chosen to defend the pig. The roles are clear. Justice must be done, but also the village must be entertained. The trial begins with a reading of the charges. The town crier, who usually shouts market prices and news from neighbouring villages, now stands tall and sombre. Be it known that this pig, owned by John the Carter, did, on the Feast of St. Mary, attack and grievously injure young Thomas, thereby causing his demise. There's a hush as he finishes, broken by a child's giggle, quickly silenced by a cuff from her mother. The priest rises to speak. He invokes scripture, arguing that animals like humans can be vessels of evil. He paints a dramatic picture, the sow as a tool of the devil, sent to punish the careless and remind all of God's justice. He gestures wildly, voice rising and falling. Some of the older women cross themselves, a few men roll their eyes. Now it's the pig's defence. The farmer stands, clearing his throat. He insists the sow was provoked, that the child should not have been left alone, that pigs know not their right from their left. He appeals for mercy, or at least clemency, offering to pay a fine or, as a last resort, let the pig join a monastery. A joke, but the magistrate doesn't smile. As the evidence is presented, things get weirder. Witnesses swear on the Gospels to tell the truth. One says he saw the pig looking angry that morning. Another that she was peaceful as a lamb until poked by a stick. A neighbour recounts with much embellishment the pig's alleged past crimes: rooting up the herb garden, chasing chickens, stealing a meat pie. Historians still argue whether these animal trials were meant to deter carelessness, or if they simply provided much-needed comic relief. To maintain proper procedure, the magistrate asks if the pig has anything to say. The sow snorts, rooting at the straw, and the court scribe solemnly notes this as no statement in her defence. The priest seizes on this as proof of guilt. The farmer shakes his head and mutters about city justice. The sentence, of course, is death. But not just any death, a public execution, complete with a tiny noose, a procession, and a special mass to purify the community. The pig is led away, the crowd following in a strange mix of solemnity and barely contained laughter. Children mimic the sow's waddle, adults debate the fairness of the trial, and the town's stray dogs look on hungrily, anticipating leftovers. As bizarre as it seems, animal trials served a function in medieval society. They reinforce the seriousness of law and order, even if the law sometimes applied to animals as much as people. You realise as you walk home that these rituals, both grim and comic, help the town process its fears and frustrations. When something senseless happens, a child dies, a crop fails, there's comfort in order, even if that order includes pigs in the dock and chickens wearing tiny hats as witnesses. The execution is a spectacle all its own. The pig, now adorned with a rough garland, is led to a spot outside the village. The priest intones a prayer, the bailiff reads the sentence, and the deed is done. Quick, if not exactly merciful. The townsfolk watch with a mix of curiosity and detachment. Later, over ale and bread, the trial is dissected in excruciating detail. Was the pig truly guilty? Should the farmer have paid a fine instead? And who, exactly, gets to keep the hide? Fringe fact: in rare cases, animals convicted in such trials were not executed but sentenced to exile or penance. In France, a group of rats was once excommunicated for crop theft, though unsurprisingly, they failed to show up in court. Historians still debate if these trials were deeply symbolic, a way to express communal grief, or just an excuse for spectacle. By midday, the crowd has dispersed, and the churchyard hosts a quieter entertainment, a gathering of locals for a riddle contest. Here, wit is prized above all. The rules are simple. Pose a riddle, stump your neighbours, and win a token prize, often nothing more than a sweet bun or a ribbon. Some riddles are clever, some crude. and a few veer into dangerous territory, like the one about the bishop and his missing undergarments, which earns a round of nervous laughter. You sit and listen as the miller's daughter, a notorious trickster, poses her challenge. I turn once, what is out will not get in. I turn again, what is in will not get out. What am I? The blacksmith's apprentice scratches his head. An old woman cackles and whispers, "A key, you dolt." There's applause, a bun awarded, and a call for more. It's a rare chance to see who's quickest of tongue and mind, a reminder that, for all its violence, medieval entertainment can be sharply intellectual. As the riddles wind down, children drift toward the puppet show, set up on the back of a cart, complete with a painted backdrop of a castle and a tiny village peopled by sock puppets. The star, inevitably, is the devil, who pops up to steal cakes, chase sheep, and make mischief. His main foil is a saintly puppet with a big wooden cross and an even bigger stick for whacking the devil on the head. The children squeal with delight. Parents pretend not to watch, but you notice more than one adult wiping away a tear from laughter or nostalgia. The puppeteer, a wiry man with quick hands and a sly smile, voices all the characters, devils, saints, even the king. The plot is always the same. Good defeats evil, but not before evil has made a spectacular mess of things. At one point, the devil steals a sausage and tries to cook it over a puppet fire, only to be doused by the saint's holy water, really just a sprinkle of well water. The crowd cheers, the devil shrieks, and another round of mischief begins. Historians still argue whether puppet shows were primarily for children, or if their sly jokes about local priests, merchants, and nobles were aimed at the adults. Either way, you realise the puppet stage is a tiny mirror of the world, chaotic, noisy, and always just one joke away from scandal. Evening settles in, but the fun isn't over. There's word of a midnight corpse dance in the churchyard, a tradition meant to honour the dead and keep their spirits friendly. You join a procession of torch-carrying neighbours, winding between gravestones as the local musicians tune up their fiddles. The mood is eerie but playful. Someone wears a mask made from an old skull, donated by the gravedigger, who claims it was spare. Others don tattered shrouds or carry dried bones, rattling them in time with the music. The dance begins slowly, then grows wilder. People spin and weave between the stones, sometimes pausing to kneel or whisper a prayer. It's equal parts respect and revelry, a way to laugh in the face of fear. Children dare each other to touch the oldest graves, and the bravest sneak up behind friends with a loud "boo!" followed by nervous laughter. Historians still debate whether these corpse dances were genuine attempts to appease restless spirits, a dark reminder of mortality, or simply an excuse to throw a wild party on holy ground. You find yourself caught up in the motion, heart pounding, face flushed. There's a strange thrill in dancing among the dead, a sense of connection, perhaps, to generations past. By the end, everyone is out of breath and the churchyard echoes with music and laughter. Someone toasts to life and to death who walks among us all, and the crowd cheers. As you make your way home, you think back over the day, animal trials and puppet devils, riddles and corpse dances. It strikes you how thin the line is between fear and fun, between the sacred and the silly. In this world, entertainment isn't just about forgetting your troubles, it's about confronting them head-on, mocking them, and sometimes, just sometimes, finding a kind of joy in the strangest places. You fall asleep smiling, the echo of laughter and the click of puppet heels still dancing through your dreams. By now you'd think nothing about medieval entertainment could surprise you. You've watched hangings and bear baitings, survived feasts of questionable hygiene, howled with laughter at jesters and gasped at tournaments. You've even seen pigs on trial and devils stealing the show on a puppet stage. But the next day dawns with a chill wind and a wild rumour. The barber surgeon has set up shop in the square and is inviting all comers to witness the most miraculous cure of all, public bloodletting. You trudge to the square, drawn by equal parts dread and curiosity, and find a scene that's part medical demonstration, part street fair. The barber surgeon is an imposing figure in a red-stained apron, sleeves rolled up to the elbows, his table cluttered with knives, leeches and basins of every shape. There's a line of hopefuls, some clutching aching heads, others pale from fevers, a few merely looking for an excuse to skip work. The crowd is thick, noisy and excited. After all, who doesn't want to watch their neighbour get bled a little? Bloodletting is as common as bread in the medieval world. The theory is simple. Illness is caused by bad humours, and letting out the right amount of blood is said to balance the body. You watch as the barber surgeon, with a flourish, announces his patient, a baker's wife complaining of headaches and melancholy. She sits on a rickety stool, rolls up her sleeve and tries to look brave. "Hold still," the barber surgeon intones, waving his knife for all to see. Children squeal in mock terror. The baker's wife flinches as the blade nicks her skin, but the crowd leans in, fascinated. Dark blood flows into a bowl, swirling as the barber surgeon explains the four humours: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, black bile, and how a careful balance keeps a person healthy. The crowd nods as if they understand. Fringe fact: even the most learned medieval doctors used astrology charts to decide when to bleed a patient, consulting the stars to avoid disaster. Historians still argue whether this was a true science, or just a way to impress the audience. The baker's wife is bandaged, given a weak ale, and sent off to applause. Next up, a blacksmith with gout, who's promised a cure if the moon is in the right house. The barber surgeon sometimes uses leeches. He's got a little jar of them, wriggling and hungry. He sets one on the blacksmith's ankle, and the children shriek as it latches on, growing fat and glistening. "It's working," someone calls, as if watching a miracle. In between procedures, the barber surgeon tells jokes and sings little ditties. He claims his knives are so sharp they could cut the worry from your brow. There's a lightness in the air, a sense that for all the grimness, this is at heart a performance. The sick and the healthy alike crowd in, marvelling at the spectacle and whispering stories of miraculous cures and terrible failures. Then comes the moment everyone's been waiting for, the big show. A local merchant, hoping for good luck before a trading trip, volunteers to be bled publicly for prosperity. The barber surgeon ties a cord around his arm, flexes his fingers for dramatic effect, and opens a vein with the practiced ease of a man who's done this 1,000 times. The crowd gasps as blood spurts into a gleaming basin. Suddenly a stray dog darts into the square, grabs a bloody rag and runs off, pursued by half a dozen children. Laughter erupts. The merchant, pale but beaming, rises shakily, waving to the crowd as if he's won a prize. The barber surgeon bows, declares him purified, and passes the basin around for all to see. Some peer inside with morbid fascination. A few cross themselves and step back. A vendor appears, hawking blood sausage, fresh from the kitchen, or so he claims. "Good for what ails you, but not for the faint of heart," the man crows, and a few daring souls buy a link, biting into it with exaggerated bravado. If you weren't feeling queasy before, you are now. Here's a mainstream historical fact. Bloodletting persisted in Europe for centuries, right through the Renaissance, endorsed by doctors, priests and kings. Sometimes whole towns lined up for a spring or autumn cleansing, convinced it would keep away plagues and pestilence. It wasn't until much later that anyone thought to question whether losing blood actually helped, or just made people dizzy and weak. The barber surgeon's show continues. He removes a splinter from a shepherd's foot, lances a boil on a butcher's back, and even extracts a tooth from a particularly unlucky tanner. Each act draws a crowd, each story grows in the telling. There's something comforting about the routine, the sense that illness and pain can be banished with a sharp knife, a firm hand, and a few good jokes. By midday, the square is stained with blood and laughter. Children chase each other, imitating the barber surgeon's flourishes, while adults debate the best bleeding days and compare scars. You overhear a pair of grandmothers arguing about the merits of leeches versus knives. "Leeches are natural," one insists. "Knives are quicker," retorts the other. The debate grows so heated that a passing priest has to step in and bless them both, just in case. Fringe fact: In some places, bloodletting became a kind of spectator sport. The local lord might offer a prize for the bravest patient or the neatest wound. Historians still argue whether this was a desperate attempt to distract from the pain or simply another excuse for a party. By late afternoon, the excitement has faded and the barber surgeon packs up his tools, handing out bits of cloth as souvenirs. Lucky rags, he claims, though you're not so sure. The crowd disperses, some clutching new bandages, others nursing mild headaches and stories to tell. But the thirst for spectacle hasn't run dry. There's already talk of another contest, wrestling and thumb wars, scheduled for the main green just before sunset. You make your way there, weaving through groups practicing holds and showing off bruises from last year's tournament. The wrestling matches are legendary, open to all comers, with only the vaguest hint of rules. No biting, no eye gouging, and no knees to the groin. Unless nobody's looking, the referee announces with a wink. The first bout pits two burly farmers against each other. They circle warily, then lunge, locking arms and grunting as they try to throw each other off balance. The crowd eggs them on, shouting advice and insults. One slips in the mud and lands flat on his back, but instead of defeat he leaps up and tackles his opponent, sending them both crashing into a barrel of cider. Laughter explodes. The match is declared a tie. Next come the thumb wars. The contest is simple but fierce. Thumbs locked, wrists straight. The first to pin the other's thumb wins. Children challenge adults. Men challenge women. And a tiny grandmother with hands like steel wins 3 rounds in a row. There are jokes. Careful, that's the thumb that stirs my stew. And the odd accusation of cheating, but it's all in good fun. The champion is awarded a ribbon, and the runners-up a pint of ale each. The wrestling continues, growing rougher as the sun dips low. Some matches end with groin hits, quickly denied of course, others with both combatants sprawled in the dirt, too tired to continue. There's no lasting injury, just bruised pride and sore muscles. The real prize, as always, is the story. Who you beat, how you almost won, and what clever trick you'll try next year. Here's another mainstream historical fact. Medieval towns were full of informal competitions like these, from wrestling to shin-kicking to tug-of-war. They were a way to settle grudges, test strength, and keep boredom at bay. The line between sport and spectacle was thin. The only thing guaranteed was a little pain and a lot of laughter. As night falls, the green empties, the air alive with talk of tomorrow's amusements. You wander home, tired but exhilarated, the memory of bloodletting and thumb wars swirling in your mind. At the end of it all, you marvel at how medieval entertainment, so violent, so weird, so gross, brings people together in ways you'd never expect. You slip into bed, the echoes of laughter and the sting of vinegar on a scraped knee lingering as you drift into uneasy but oddly satisfied sleep. A day of bruises, laughter, and barely a pint of blood spilled would be enough for most towns. But in the medieval world, the appetite for spectacle is insatiable, and today brings a show that promises both drama and absurdity in equal measure. A genuine legal trial, but not for a man or even a pig. This time, the entire town has gathered to watch a group of chickens stand accused of witchcraft. The line between courtroom and carnival blurs once more, as you join your neighbours to witness the next bizarre chapter in the village's entertainment calendar. It begins with a bell, rung not by the church but by the town crier, whose voice rings out across the square. All rise for the honourable court of Justice Aldous. Let those who would bear witness come forward. The stage is a hastily erected platform, complete with a carved wooden chair for the magistrate and a long table covered in legal-looking scrolls. The accused, a handful of clucking, wide-eyed chickens, are penned to one side, guarded by the youngest apprentices who barely keep straight faces. You push forward for a better view. The crowd is buzzing. Some come out of curiosity, some for the spectacle, and more than a few with a nervous edge. Whispers have been flying for days, hens laying eggs in strange patterns, roosters crowing at midnight, and one particularly bold rumour that a chicken cursed the baker's bread, turning it to stone. Whether anyone believes these stories is almost beside the point. What matters is that everyone's here, and the court is in session. The magistrate, Justice Aldous, is a stern figure in a robe that's seen better days, his white beard wagging as he reads the charges. These chickens, being creatures of unnatural habits, are hereby accused of consorting with witches and sowing discord in our village. He gestures for the prosecution, a nervous-looking parish priest, to make his case. The priest launches into a passionate speech about the dangers of the occult, invoking scripture and citing several recent incidents: the baker's ruined loaves, the miller's horse that refused to work, and the strange mark that appeared on the mayor's door. Each event, he claims, is evidence of dark forces at play, and the chickens are somehow involved. The audience murmurs, half in agreement, half in amusement. A few bold souls start a running tally on who in town has been cursed in the past week. Next comes the defence, a plucky young girl whose family owns 2 of the chickens on trial. She stands on a crate to be seen, her voice clear and strong. She swears on her honour and the saints that her chickens have never dabbled in dark arts, that they lay eggs and peck worms like any honest bird. She challenges the crowd to find a more diligent hen or a more faithful rooster. For a moment the audience is quiet, moved by her bravery, or perhaps just surprised to hear a child speak so well in court. Then the witnesses are called. The baker testifies that the chickens often pecked near his door on the day his bread turned to stone. The blacksmith claims he heard one crow at midnight. A bad omen, he insists. Yet others, an old widow and a pair of giggling children, attest to the chickens' innocence, describing them as gentle, hard-working, and far too stupid to cast a spell. The court scribe struggles to keep up with the contradictions. The trial continues, with all the theatrics of a stage play. The priest attempts to interrogate one of the chickens, holding it aloft and demanding it confess. The chicken flaps, squawks, and leaves an unwelcome deposit on the magistrate's shoes. The crowd roars with laughter, and even Justice Aldous struggles not to smile. "It seems the accused has spoken in its own defence," he says dryly, setting off another round of applause. As the sun climbs, the trial grows rowdier. Bets are placed on the verdict, snacks are passed around, and at least one song is composed on the spot, the Ballad of the Witchy Hen, soon sung by a gaggle of children weaving through the legs of adults. The whole event feels less like justice and more like festival, a release valve for the village's tension and a celebration of its collective imagination. Eventually, Justice Aldous calls for order. He clears his throat and pronounces the verdict. On the evidence presented and the testimony given, it is the judgment of this court that the chickens are not witches, but creatures of God, and may be released to peck in peace. The crowd cheers, the girl hugs her birds, and the accused are carried home in triumph, still blissfully unaware of their brush with infamy. Historians still argue whether such trials were meant to serve as real legal precedents or were just elaborate ways for communities to process fear and uncertainty. You're left with the impression that, whatever the intent, the result is the same: laughter, stories, and a shared memory for years to come. But the fun isn't over. As the trial disperses, the crowd surges toward the green for the next spectacle, a round of mock king festivities. The Lord of Misrule is about to be chosen, one commoner elevated for a day to rule over the village with laughter, chaos, and just enough danger to keep everyone on their toes. The selection process is as democratic as it is absurd. All the names of the eligible townsfolk, young men and women, a few older eccentrics, even the odd dog, just for mischief, are placed in a hat. The youngest child in town draws a name, and a wild cheer erupts as Big Tom the Butcher is declared the new Lord of Misrule. The crown, a battered wreath of holly and ribbons, goes on his head, and a faded cloak is draped over his shoulders. Armed with a wooden sceptre and a devilish grin, Tom ascends the makeshift throne to issue his first royal decree. "By my rule, no shoes may be worn until sunset," he bellows. "Let all feast on bread and onions, and let the oldest woman dance a jig." Groans and giggles follow as villagers kick off their shoes, peel onions, and encourage Widow Marta, who surprises everyone by leading a sprightly dance. The Lord of Misrule is escorted through the town, issuing increasingly absurd orders. All men must speak in rhyme, all women must wear their bonnets backward, and any who fail are subject to punishment, a face dabbed with soot, or a handful of feathers down the shirt. The whole village becomes a topsy-turvy world. Servants order masters, children command their parents, and even the priest is compelled to sing a bawdy song before he's allowed to return to his dignified duties. Laughter echoes through the streets, and for a few wild hours the usual rules are suspended. Yet beneath the jokes and pranks, there's a thread of danger. Sometimes these mock king festivals spiral out of control. Pranks become riots, punishments become real, and the boundary between jest and rebellion blurs. Historians still argue whether the Lord of Misrule was a harmless outlet for social pressure or a genuine threat to the established order. As dusk falls, the chaos subsides. The crown is returned to storage, the cloak folded away, and Tom resumes his ordinary life, though he'll be king in stories for months to come. The village gathers for a communal meal, roasted vegetables, bread, and the last of the summer ale. There are speeches, toasts, and songs. Stories of the chicken's trial and Tom's reign are retold with embellishments, each listener adding a detail, each laugh growing louder. You sit by the fire, wrapped in the warmth of shared experience, marvelling at the strangeness of the day. Medieval entertainment, you realise, is never just about distraction. It's a crucible for anxieties, a rehearsal for real fears, a wild release that leaves everyone, at least for a night, feeling just a little bit lighter. As darkness deepens, you drift home, feet dusty, heart full. You pass the now empty platform, the quiet green, and the church whose bells have rung in so many odd and marvellous days. Tomorrow will bring more work, more worry. But tonight, you fall asleep with a smile, knowing that whatever else life brings, it will never, ever be boring. By now, your sense of normal has been stretched into something barely recognisable. You've watched pigs stand trial, jesters gamble with their necks, and entire towns dance themselves into collapse. So it should come as no surprise that today's form of entertainment is a mud carnival. That's not a joke, that's not slang, that's not a misremembered folk tale. No, this is the real deal. A festival of dirt, meat, music, and madness. And if you plan to survive it, you'd better leave your shoes at home. The first sign it's Mud Carnival Day is the sudden disappearance of anything remotely clean. Your neighbours are already ankle deep in muck by dawn. Buckets splash, pigs squeal, and the village green has been transformed into a battlefield of pure, unapologetic mess. The ground has been soaked overnight, on purpose. Local boys spent hours dragging water barrels from the river and pouring them over the turf to ensure maximum squish. You arrive just in time to see the mayor's youngest son take a running leap into the centre of the green, belly flopping into a crater of ooze that swallows him whole. The crowd roars. You're barely through the first chorus of laughter when the carnival officials appear. They wear badges made from turnip slices, capes fashioned from potato sacks, and expressions of exaggerated seriousness. One rings a bell. Hear ye, hear ye. All entrants must be barefoot and all winners must be completely unrecognisable. Another official holds up the festival's trophy, a twisted hunk of driftwood nailed to a chicken bone. The golden slop, he declares, let the games begin. What follows is part contest, part pageant, and part community therapy. First up is the mud sprint, a mad dash across the green where the goal is not just speed, but style. Contestants line up in their most ruinable tunics, each given a raw onion to carry like a baton. A drum beats. They're off. Feet slip, legs flail, and almost nobody makes it upright past the halfway point. One poor lad trips, flies, and lands with a sound like a dropped pudding. He emerges looking like a swamp monster, and is immediately declared the winner for dramatic impact. Next is the great meat toss. Don't ask where the meat comes from. You probably don't want to know. Contestants stand on opposite sides of a trough, flinging soggy hunks of mystery meat into buckets while blindfolded. Each successful throw earns a cheer, each miss earns a slap of mud from the opposing team. You wince as a piece lands in someone's hood. "Bonus point," someone yells. You're not sure what the rules are, and neither is anyone else, which is kind of the point. The mud wrestling is the crowd favourite. It starts with a parade of local champions. Farmers, bakers, smiths. All stripped to the waist, greased with goose fat and paired off by lot. The referee is the town's oldest man, who can't hear a word anyone says but insists on inspecting everyone's feet before each match. "Strong archers make strong warriors," he proclaims, waving his cane. The matches themselves are glorious chaos. Two men lock arms, slide, slip and collapse in slow motion. Occasionally someone gains the upper hand, but the mud always equalises. One round ends with both combatants stuck flat on their backs, too tired to continue. The referee declares a spiritual draw, and both are awarded honorary potato crowns. Women join in next, and the crowd gets louder, rowdier and slightly more scandalised, especially when the mayor's sister throws her opponent clean over her shoulder and into a puddle the size of a small pond. You overhear a monk mutter, "I need to pray," before proceeding to cheer louder than anyone. Mainstream historical fact. Medieval carnivals were indeed riotous affairs, often celebrated just before Lent. They featured public spectacles, cross-dressing, mock battles, and the deliberate reversal of roles. Cleanliness was temporarily abandoned in favour of chaotic revelry, and entire towns would participate in acts that, in any other season, might have been grounds for punishment. Fringe tidbit. In some parts of Europe, villages would crown a carnival king who would eventually be symbolically executed at the end of the festival, sometimes represented by a puppet, sometimes by a real volunteer dunked in a river. It symbolised the cleansing of sin and the return to order. Historians still debate whether these rituals were cathartic, subversive, or just good muddy fun. Back in your town, the mud carnival continues with the costume procession. There's only one rule: your outfit must be made from items found in a barn, a midden, or your grandmother's attic. What results is a parade of breathtaking absurdity. One man wears a barrel with holes cut out for arms and legs, crowned with a nest of straw and a live chicken. A young woman wears a dress made of cabbage leaves, carefully stitched together with horsehair. There's even a child dressed as a walking privy, complete with sound effects and a serious face. You try not to laugh, you fail. There's dancing too. Not elegant candlelit courtly dances, but the kind of dance where feet slap mud, arms flail, and partners are chosen based on who hasn't fallen down yet. Fiddlers saw away at their instruments from atop hay bales. Drums beat a rhythm you feel in your ribs. A man with a panpipe tries to lead a round dance, only to be dragged into a mudslide by a group of giggling teens. No one is safe, no one is clean. The carnival also includes the trials, minigames designed to test your courage, creativity, or just how much shame you're willing to abandon. There's the blind goat chase. No goats are actually blind, where contestants wear sacks over their heads and try to find the town's most stubborn goat by sound alone. There's onion shouting, where you bite into a raw onion and yell your name as loudly as possible. Whoever gets the most people to remember their name wins a gourd. And then there's the finale, the Tower of Slop. It's exactly what it sounds like. A teetering stack of barrels, crates and greasy logs rising high above the town green, covered in mud, honey, feathers and fish guts. The goal? Climb to the top and ring the bell. The prize? Eternal glory and half a roast chicken. You watch as contestant after contestant makes the attempt. Some slip immediately. Others get halfway before the whole structure wobbles and sends them flying. One daring lad makes it to the final barrel, only to be undone by a squirt of eels someone had hidden near the top. He tumbles, roars, and lands in the mud with a splat. The crowd screams in delight. Finally, against all odds, a tiny girl no older than 10 scales the entire mess with monkey-like agility. She rings the bell, pumps her fist, and flings mud into the air like confetti. The crowd goes wild. She is crowned Queen of the Slop, handed the half chicken, and lifted onto shoulders while the band plays a discordant tune in her honour. The sun sets behind the trees, and the carnival slowly winds down, Fires are lit. Bowls of stew are passed around. People gather in tired clumps, comparing injuries, ruined clothes, and the surprising amount of joy that comes from letting go of dignity for just one day. You're soaked, shivering, and happier than you've been all month. As you sit on the edge of the green, watching stars appear in the sky, someone passes you a cup of cider. A fiddler plays a soft tune. Nearby, the mud still bubbles where a few stubborn children continue to wallow, their laughter cutting through the night like silver bells. You realise that this carnival isn't about mud or meat or absurd contests. It's about breaking the monotony, about levelling the field between rich and poor, strong and weak, young and old. In the mud, everyone looks the same. In the mess, no one can pretend to be better than anyone else. For one glorious squelching day, you're all equals. As you make your way home, sore and slathered, you know you'll remember this day forever. The bruise on your knee will fade. The stench of fermented cabbage will eventually wash off. But the feeling, that giddy, shared rebellion against rules and reason will stay with you. And as you drift to sleep, your dreams are muddy, loud, and full of laughter, and you wouldn't trade them for anything. You wake the next morning with a backache, a swollen toe, and your ear still ringing from someone's celebratory bagpipe solo. Your clothes are stiff with dried mud. Your hair smells faintly of cabbage and ale. You rinse your face in the cold basin by the hearth, but there's no undoing the damage, at least not to your dignity. The mud carnival has come and gone, but the bruises remain. Still, life doesn't slow down for sore feet or shame. Today you head into the town's quieter side of entertainment. The puzzle games, riddles, and puppet shows tucked away in shaded corners where cleverness outshines strength, and those with quick tongues shine just as brightly as any knight in armour. You wander down a narrow alley between the bakery and the fishmonger's stall, past barrels that smell like pickled onions and crates stacked with wilted herbs, until you reach a cobbled square known by all as the Commons. This is where you'll find what passes for peace in a medieval town, a circle of riddlers, a quiet puppet stage, and the kind of entertainment that doesn't, usually, leave bruises. First you sit with the riddle circle. It's nothing formal, just a collection of elders, teens, and the occasional monk, sitting on stools or barrels tossing riddles like coins. The rules are unspoken. You wait your turn, speak clearly, and if your riddle is clever enough to stump the circle, you win a boiled egg. Sometimes the egg's fresh, sometimes not. An old woman with a face like a walnut croaks the first challenge. I build no walls, yet I divide. I move no feet, yet I cross the world. What am I? People murmur. A boy guesses, the wind. A merchant says, a shadow. A priest sipping weak ale from a pewter cup smiles and says, language. A pause. Correct, says the old woman, and hands him the egg. It promptly rolls from his palm and cracks on the cobblestones. The crowd howls. Even the old woman laughs. You stay a while longer, tossing out riddles of your own, some you remember, some you invent on the spot. One about a headless beast that guards treasure, a key, another about something that dies each night and rises each day, the sun. A tanner's apprentice gets stumped by your third riddle and tries to bribe you with a half-eaten meat pie. You accept. It's the most edible thing you've had in days. Just beyond the circle, a puppet show is underway, drawing children and adults alike. The puppet master is a hunched man in a patched cloak, with fingers like sticks and eyes sharp as a fox's. His stage is a painted wooden box propped atop two barrels, and inside it, a cast of mismatched marionettes dangles from strings. St. Peter, a demon with crooked horns, a drunk knight, and a sarcastic goose. The story is familiar. The battle between good and evil, heaven and hell, but with a twist. Here, the devil is charming, the saint forgets his lines, and the knight tries to sell his sword for ale. The goose steals the show, honking its way through each scene and flapping its wings every time someone says the word sin. A puppet angel accidentally kicks a puppet sinner off a painted cliff, to which the goose remarks, "That's one way to repent." The crowd cackles. A mother clutches her giggling child. An old man wipes his eyes. laughing so hard he wheezes, and when the saint finally triumphs, barely. The crowd gives a cheer, not for justice, but for the goose, who bows low and honks, Amen. Fringe fact: puppet shows in the Middle Ages often served as social commentary, slipping critiques of the clergy, nobility, or even the monarchy into the mouths of stuffed fabric and painted wood. It gave common people a space to laugh at power, safely. Historians still argue whether puppet masters were seen as jesters or secret philosophers. The show ends, the crowd thins, and the puppet master disappears behind his curtain, no doubt preparing for the next round. You move on, heading toward the tavern courtyard where another subtle form of entertainment has already begun: storytelling duels. Two storytellers stand across from each other, armed with nothing but their voices. A coin is tossed, and the first launches into a tale, usually dramatic, often absurd. The trick isn't just in the plot, but the delivery. The faces they make, the voices they switch between, the way they stretch a simple fishing trip into a heroic epic involving a talking trout and a warlock's curse. When the first tale ends, the second must match it, story for story, twist for twist. A tale about a stolen cow becomes a tale about a cow who speaks Latin and becomes a bishop. Laughter is loud, wagers are placed. Whoever draws the most gasps or guffaws is the winner, and wins a free drink or a new pair of socks, depending on who's judging. You listen for hours. There's a tale about a man who traded his soul for a better plough, only to trick the devil into becoming his mule. Another about a girl who outwits a band of thieves by pretending to be their grandmother. The stories aren't always logical, but they're magnetic, drawn from real-life rumours, old legends, and whatever madness the storyteller dreamed up after too much wine. Here's a mainstream historical fact. Storytelling was central to medieval life. In a world where most couldn't read, stories passed knowledge, morals and history from one generation to the next. Minstrels, bards, and travelling fabulists were prized guests in both village taverns and noble courts. The best of them could command a room better than any sword-wielding knight. Eventually the duels end and the courtyard quiets. A few of the older children begin performing mimicries of the day's events, parodying the riddles, reenacting the puppet show, repeating the best lines from the tales with over-the-top accents. It's imitation as entertainment, and the crowd once again falls into easy laughter. You join in, heart light, belly full of bread and borrowed jokes. Evening settles over the town. The sun dips behind the rooftops, throwing orange light across chimney pots and church steeples. You find yourself drawn to a smaller gathering by the old well. There, a quiet monk, one you've barely seen before, tells a different kind of story. No puppets, no devils, no punchlines. Just a tale of a knight who gave up glory to care for a dying farmer. No one laughs, but no one moves either. The air grows still as the story unfolds, a hush so deep you can hear the coals crackling in a nearby hearth. When the tale ends, the monk bows and leaves. No applause, no prizes, just a moment of quiet reflection, a strange pause in a town addicted to noise. You sit there long after the others have drifted away, thinking about how different today's entertainment felt. No blood, no bruises, just words and wit, stories and silence. And in some strange way, it feels like the most intimate kind of joy, one shared not through spectacle, but through imagination. As you walk home in the dark, stars scatter overhead. Somewhere in the distance a goose honks, and someone whistles a tune from the puppet show. You pass the Riddler's Circle, now empty, and the barrels that served as seats. You remember the cracked egg, the smiling child, the goose with its holy vengeance, and you realise something simple and beautiful. In the medieval world, entertainment didn't need polish. It didn't need perfection. It needed only people. People willing to laugh, to listen, to believe, even just for a few minutes, that anything could be possible, even a devil-honking goose. You crawl into bed, the echo of stories spinning in your mind like threads in a loom, and for the first time in a long time, you don't dream of fire or blood. but of words, dancing like candlelight across a quiet room. You wake to a grey sky and the sound of bells. Not church bells this time, but something duller, deeper. Warning bells. Somewhere out near the edge of town, a guard has spotted riders on the road, strangers. That alone is enough to rattle the whole village. You dress quickly, slipping on boots still caked with carnival mud, and rush outside. People gather along the main road, watching a procession of cloaked figures approach from the east. At the head rides a nobleman draped in velvet, a brooch at his throat shaped like a serpent curled around a cross. His men carry spears, and behind them rumbles a cart covered in linen tarps. No one speaks until they reach the town square. Then the herald steps forward and reads from a scroll. By order of His Grace, Duke Bernhard of Olbrook, the holy relic of St. Laria shall be displayed in your village for 3 days. All are to gather for blessing. All are to show reverence, and all shall pay tribute. The crowd murmurs. A relic. In your dusty, grubby little town. The relics of saints are usually reserved for cathedrals or great cities, not places where pigs wear crowns and jesters outwit priests. The townsfolk assemble out of curiosity and, let's face it, entertainment. A miracle, they say. A blessing. Perhaps even a cure for illness or infertility. Perhaps the relic glows. Perhaps it whispers. The guards throw back the tarp. Inside, the cart rests a crystal box, and within it, nestled on a cushion of red silk, lies a finger. That's what it looks like. A dried, shriveled finger wrapped in golden thread. The finger of St. Laria the Mender, the herald proclaims. He who healed the blind and calmed beasts with a word. You squint. It looks like something that fell behind the butcher's table and got left there a week too long. Still, the town is entranced. People weep. Children kneel. The smith's wife crosses herself and claims her bad hip has already stopped aching. Others shuffle forward to press coins into a wooden bowl and kiss the glass. For 3 days, this is your entertainment. The relic becomes a source of awe and amusement alike. Some treat it with reverence. Others whisper that it's a scam, that the finger came from a thief hanged in Marnock last spring. He did calm beasts, a farmer jokes, mostly by feeding them his own foot. Fringe fact. Medieval Europe saw thousands of relics circulating. Bones, teeth, hair, sandals, even alleged tears of saints. Some were genuine, many were fake. But it hardly mattered. Belief gave them power. Historians still argue whether these objects offered true spiritual solace or simply fed a hunger for wonder in a brutal world. Each day the town lines up again. Pilgrims even arrive from neighbouring villages. One woman claims her son spoke for the first time after touching the glass. Another says her cow finally gave milk again. The butcher's apprentice swears he saw the relic glow, but only after 2 cups of mead. On the second night, the lord of the manor hosts a feast in honour of the visiting duke's men. You sneak in to watch from the shadows. The relic sits at the table's head, propped on a velvet pillow. Toasts are made in its name. The jester tries a joke about St. Laria losing his finger in a drunken dice game. He's rewarded with a slice of bread and a wink from the duke's captain. Here's a mainstream historical fact. Relic processions were often used to unite communities, reinforce religious authority, or raise money. The display of sacred bones or garments could turn an ordinary town into a spiritual destination, complete with miracles, markets, and mayhem. By the 3rd day, belief begins to fray. A storm rolls in. The baker's daughter falls ill despite praying at the relic's feet. A man tries to sell splinters of the saint's coffin from his pocket, claiming each one guarantees good harvests. He's chased off with cabbage stalks. Then, late that night, the relic vanishes. The town erupts in panic. Some blame thieves. Others blame the devil. The priest blames the townsfolk's lack of piety. The Lord blames everyone and threatens to hang the next person who speaks out of turn. A search ensues. Barns, cellars, and even the well are scoured. One old man insists he saw the relic flying through the air like a firefly. Another swears he heard it whisper his name. Eventually, the mystery is solved. A drunk stable boy is found passed out behind the tavern, clutching a lump of chicken bone wrapped in silk. He insists he mistook it for the relic and wanted to feel holy for once. The real relic, however, is never found. The Duke's men leave in anger. The townspeople are left confused, disappointed, and oddly exhilarated. For 3 days, they believed. They argued. They laughed. And now, with the relic gone, they have a new story to tell. Was it real? Was it a scam? Does it matter? The town goes back to its rhythms. The jester writes a new song about St. Laria's travelling thumb. The puppet master adds a new character, a glowing finger that curses anyone who doubts its power. The children play a game called Find the Relic, hiding sticks in each other's shoes and pretending to be pilgrims. You find yourself wondering if the relic mattered more in its absence than its presence. It gave people hope and jokes and something to believe in, even if only for a few muddy, mead-drenched days. That night, as you lie under your blanket and listen to the wind howl through the cracks in the wall, you smile, because once again, the medieval world has reminded you, truth and entertainment aren't always separate things. Sometimes the best stories are the ones you're not quite sure you believe. By the time the story of St. Laria's missing finger starts to fade, the town has already found its next obsession. One darker, stranger, and infinitely more dangerous. You're drawn in by whispers, like always. This time the talk isn't of jesters or puppet devils, it's about death. Real death. Not the tidy gallows kind or the performative mock kings and pig trials, but quiet, creeping, inexplicable deaths. A girl who coughed blood behind the granary. A beggar who simply stopped walking, mid-step, and collapsed like a puppet with its strings cut. A baby, healthy one day, limp and grey the next. You see it in people's eyes, dread, and something sharper, suspicion. No one knows exactly what's happening, but everyone has a theory. And in the medieval world, when fear spreads faster than disease, it doesn't take long for entertainment to twist into accusation. Someone has to be blamed. Someone always is. It begins at the edge of the square with a quiet man named Thomas. He's a weaver, keeps to himself. No wife, no children, keeps bees, which already makes him strange. One child, too young to understand fear but old enough to echo it, says, "Thomas talks to his bees, and the bees listen." That's all it takes. By sundown, Thomas has been accused of consorting with demons, of poisoning wells, of knowing things he shouldn't. There's no trial, not yet. First, there's the entertainment, the terrible kind. You've seen this happen before. Maybe not here, maybe not with bees, but you've heard stories. And now you're watching one unfold as the villagers gather in that peculiar mix of solemnity and barely concealed glee. Because as awful as it is, it's also something to do, something to feel, something to direct their helplessness at. They bring Thomas to the square. He doesn't struggle, just looks at everyone as though seeing them for the first time. They strip him to his undershirt, tie him to a stool, and begin the cleansing. A public interrogation dressed up as ritual. The priest leads it, armed with incense and holy water, muttering Latin prayers that hang in the air like smoke. A bucket of water is poured over Thomas's head. He's asked to confess, to admit he's in league with the devil, to explain how he's cursed the children. He denies nothing, but he also admits nothing. Instead, he speaks calmly. "I'm not your sickness. Your wells are poisoned because the barrels are cracked. Your food is rotten because the rats have overrun the stores. Your children are dying because this world is full of suffering, and you don't want to face it." You think maybe this is bravery. Others call it blasphemy. A pot of ashes is dumped on his head. The children laugh. Someone throws a turnip. Another splatters him with ale. He flinches but says nothing more. The next morning Thomas is gone, vanished. No one admits to seeing what happened to him. The priest says he's been taken by God. The jester, softer than usual, mutters that he probably ran to the forest. The baker says nothing at all, just kneads dough harder than he needs to. And the town, it pretends to move on. But the mood has shifted. You feel it in the way people look at one another. You feel it when the puppet show quietly stops performing, when the music in the tavern turns minor, melancholic, when the riddles dry up and the jester stops making fun of the Reeve's nose. Even the fair is quieter this year. No corpse dance, no devil mask, no crowned pigs. It's as if joy has become dangerous, like laughter might invite punishment. But people can't live without stories, so they create new ones. Tales start circulating of a dark spirit in the woods, Thomas turned into a ghost or a beast, or something worse. Children dare each other to walk to the edge of the trees. One swears she heard buzzing, another says he saw a figure kneeling among the hives. The beekeeper becomes a kind of monster, and monsters, even imagined ones, make life easier. They give the pain a name, they make suffering feel less random, and in a strange, sad way, they entertain. Fringe fact, in the Middle Ages, public fear often became theatre. Witchcraft trials, heresy accusations, even the plague itself became the stage for communal tension. Entertainment didn't always mean joy. Sometimes it meant catharsis, sometimes it meant cruelty. 1 week after Tomas disappears, a young man finds honey at his doorstep. Sweet, rich, dark gold. He eats it. The next morning his fever vanishes. He tells no one. But a few days later the same happens to another, and another. The town begins to whisper again, but this time it's not suspicion. It's awe, or guilt, or maybe just desperation cloaked in wonder. Maybe he was never cursed, someone says. Maybe we were. You watch the tide shift, not quickly, not all at once. But gradually people start laughing again. A riddler returns to the commons. The puppet master adds a new character, a bee in a cloak who speaks in rhyme and stings only those who tell lies. The town begins to heal, though no one says it that way. The relic is still gone. The jester still limps from a twisted ankle, but people gather once more in the square. Not for a trial, not for a burning, but for a game of dice or a song, or just to sit in silence and share roasted onions. You think about Tomas, whether he's alive, whether he watches from the woods, whether he meant to forgive them with honey, or simply left behind something sweeter than fear. You'll never know, but you'll remember. The silence, the buzzing, the brittle edge between entertainment and accusation, and how quickly a laugh can turn into a scream, and back again. That night, you fall asleep to the sound of bees outside your window, and for the first time in weeks the dreams come soft and golden. The seasons shift, mud dries, festivals fade, the fevered hunt for devils and demons slows. You begin to notice that entertainment, like everything in the medieval world, follows a rhythm. It isn't always chaos and carnivals. Sometimes it's slower, stranger, a little sad, and just as essential. Winter is coming, and with it a new form of medieval amusement, the long, cold storytelling nights. There's no pageantry now, no mud wrestling or mock kings, just flickering hearths, too many bodies crowded into too little space, and stories, endless stories. You gather with your family or the group of half-related people who've become your family and pull your blanket tight around your shoulders. The shutters are bolted, the stew is half congealed, the fire is low, but there's warmth, and that's enough. Tonight's storyteller is Berna, a grandmother so old no one remembers when she arrived. She smells like onions and wool. Her hands are leather. But when she speaks, the room stills. Her voice is slow, gravelly. She begins with a familiar line. There once was a man who drank the moon. You've heard this one. You know how it ends. He goes mad, becomes a bird, flies to the stars and forgets he was ever human, but that's not the point. You're not here for plot. You're here for rhythm, for the lilt of her voice, the rising hush when she pauses, the sound of the storm outside and the fire crackling as punctuation. And most importantly, you're here together. Because in winter, when days are short and death looms close, entertainment becomes about more than distraction. It's survival, not of the body, but of the spirit. Without laughter, tales, or dreams, the cold might swallow you whole. Historians agree that these nights, these informal oral traditions, were the backbone of culture. Epic poems, morality fables, ghost stories, local legends, they were passed from tongue to tongue, woven and rewoven with each telling. They weren't written down, they weren't recorded, they lived only in memory and in moments like this. Fringe tidbit. Some medieval communities believed that stories themselves had magic, that a tale told well enough could keep wolves from a door, or chase away illness, or soften the mood of a grieving house. Some even believed that a bad story, one poorly told or broken halfway, could curse the listener with bad luck. You shift closer to the fire, cheeks warm, toes numb. Burner's tale ends, and another begins, this time from Joffrey, the blacksmith boy. His stories are silly, wild, filled with talking cows and trousers that sing. You can't stop grinning. When he finishes, he bows dramatically and slaps a chunk of bread into his mouth. "Beat that," he says. You try. Your story's half-formed, something about a knight and a blind dragon. It stumbles, you forget a part, someone snorts, but they listen, and when you're done, they clap anyway. The next day the skies stay grey, there's no market, no music, just chores, and the slow grind of cold days. You pass a frozen pond, see a group of boys hacking holes in the ice with sticks. Fishing, they claim, is more likely they're just bored, or hoping for mermaids. Nearby, two girls are painting with soot on the wall of the mill house. Crude figures of saints and goats, locking horns like warriors. Even in deep winter, people find ways to create, to turn silence into stories, or games, or rituals. You hear a rumour that the tanner's apprentice is hosting a secret trial of snow, where local lads leap into frozen drifts and roll until they scream. Supposedly, the winner earns a goose feather and a week of chores paid for by the losers. You suspect the apprentice just enjoys watching people freeze their toes off. The priest frowns on these games, says they're pagan, or foolish, or both, but no one listens. Even he must know that without these small absurdities people would crack, or worse, fall silent. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Winter in the Middle Ages was brutally hard. Starvation, disease, isolation. It wore on people. But oddly, it was also a time of creativity. With farm work paused, people turned to crafting, mending, storytelling and games. It was in the coldest, quietest times that imagination roared to life. You visit the church one morning to stay warm. It's quiet, incense lingering in the rafters. A boy kneels near the altar, stacking candles into strange shapes. A girl hums as she polishes the baptismal font. Even here, where solemnity is expected, you see play creeping in. Later that week, the jester returns. He's been gone since the trial of Thomas. People thought he'd run off, or been silenced. But he walks into the square like a ghost shaking off snow. No flourish, no bells, just a slow, exaggerated limp. He bows, then, without speaking, pulls from his coat a bundle of sticks and assembles a puppet show right there on the frozen fountain. No devils this time, no kings or saints, just two stick figures talking about the weather. "I hear it's cold," says one. "Colder than a nun's blessing," says the other. A beat. Then both collapse into the snow, and the crowd, thin as it is, bursts into laughter. Entertainment like nature adapts, shrinks, waits, then blooms again, even in frost. The jester doesn't stay long, just long enough to remind people what a laugh feels like. He leaves behind one puppet on a stick, poked into a snowbank. The children gather around it like it's a relic. Maybe it is. You walk home that evening, feet numb, breath puffing clouds into the twilight. In one window you see shadows dancing. Someone's miming a story behind candlelight. In another you hear a lute. Off in the woods, someone sings. And for the first time in a while you don't feel the cold so sharply. Because the truth is, medieval entertainment was never about polish or perfection. It was about connection. People finding each other in the dark, holding on to stories the way one might hold on to hope. Tight, with both hands. As you crawl under your blanket, Burner mutters, "Tell us one more, won't you?" You close your eyes and begin. Once, in a village colder than this one, there lived a goat who dreamed of summer. And the world briefly feels warm again. The first birds of spring don't sing so much as croak. Raspy and suspicious, like even they can't believe winter finally ended. You rise early, startled by the sudden hush of snowmelt, the smell of thawing earth. All winter long, stories held your village together. Now, with light creeping back and colour returning to the fields, entertainment shifts again, this time into something raw, something restless. Spring means rebirth, but in your world, rebirth comes with blood and noise and spectacle. The maypole is being carved already, ribbons dyed with whatever the apothecary hasn't hoarded for fevers. Boys practice leaping over brush fires. Girls rehearse dances taught by women who swear they learned them from fairies. You wander into the square, where rehearsals for the Spring Mummers play are underway. If winter was for memory, spring is for theatre, and not the quiet kind. The mummers arrive cloaked in furs and feathers, their faces painted with ash and flour. Their leader, who might be a farmer by trade but today calls himself Sir Deathbane the Re-Dead, waves a wooden sword and begins rehearsing his lines, which involve dying 6 times and being resurrected 7, each more dramatically than the last. You chuckle. You've seen this play before. It's always the same bones. A noble hero fights a devil, dies, gets revived by a wise fool or drunken priest, and then wins the day, usually by accident. The audience doesn't care. It's the ritual that matters, the rhythm, the shared absurdity. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Mummers' plays were seasonal folk dramas, often performed in villages and crossroads during holidays. They used stock characters, relied on repetition, and featured themes of death and rebirth, mirroring the agricultural cycle. Despite being banned by some authorities for their bawdiness or pagan roots, they persisted for centuries. As rehearsal continues, the mummers add new elements. This year apparently the devil rides a donkey, and the hero defeats him by tickling his feet. A blacksmith's apprentice volunteers to play the donkey. He instantly regrets it. The joke, of course, is half the point. Later in the tavern you hear tales of other spring games. The egg hunt of doom, where eggs are hidden in buckets of eels. The dance of the greased plough, don't ask. And something new called the snail race, which is exactly what it sounds like but with dramatic commentary and tiny flags. Everyone's restless, giddy, and hungry for fun that doesn't involve shivering or scraping mould off cheese. The jester returns too. He wears spring colours now, greens and yellows, daisies tucked into his belt. His jokes hit a little lighter now. He no longer mocks the dead. He teases lovers, dreams, ambition. "You call that a haircut?" he says to the reeve. "I've seen cleaner lines on sheep." He performs in the square, balancing on a barrel while juggling 3 cabbages and reciting all the saints' names backward. At least, you think they're saints. One might be a sausage. Fringe tidbit. In some medieval towns, jesters were assigned seasonal duties. Spring brought renewal jests, where the fool symbolically banished winter by roasting it in effigy, or staging mock weddings between straw dummies. These ritual absurdities were believed to keep the village in cosmic balance. Historians still argue if these performances were genuine religious rites, or just really good excuses to throw food. You spend your days moving from one bizarre event to another. A flower duel breaks out between 2 merchant daughters, who slap each other with bundles of wild thyme until they collapse giggling. An old man challenges his own shadow to a duel. Children tie bells to frogs and declare them spring knights. And then there's the May Queen. She's chosen by vote, or by luck, or because her brother bribed the puppet master with pickled onions. No one's sure. But once chosen, she is robed in white, crowned in ivy, and treated like royalty for a day. She rides through town on a cart pulled by sheep. People bow, boys throw petals. The jester proposes marriage, again. Her duties are mostly ceremonial: bless the crops, smile at babies, and survive the compliments of every toothless farmer who insists she looks like a young Saint Mildred. The day ends with dancing, long ribbons, long songs, a circle wide enough to hold everyone, from the smallest child to the village drunkard who claims he once kissed a fairy and caught warts for a month. It's beautiful. Not because it's flawless, but because it isn't. Because the ribbons tangle. Because the drums are offbeat. Because someone falls and someone else lifts them back up. Because once again the town is laughing together. Evening arrives and torches are lit. Bread is broken, mead is spilled. A boy tries to kiss the May Queen and gets a flower down his tunic for the trouble. The puppet master performs a new piece, a flower who falls in love with a rock, and somehow it's the funniest thing you've ever seen. And when the night fades and the stars return, there's something electric in the air. Hope, maybe, or relief, or just the feeling that life, for all its madness, keeps going. People return home muddy, tired, happy, and you? You sit by your window and think about everything you've seen. The violence, the nonsense, the beauty, the grief, the moments of awe and absurdity stitched together into something that maybe, just maybe, means more than it looks. You think about how entertainment in your world is never just fun. It's survival, it's protest, it's ritual, it's joy with dirt under its fingernails. You think about stories, told in barns, whispered in beds, shouted from barrels, and you think about how none of it ever really ends. The seasons turn, the songs change, but the need to laugh, to marvel, to connect, that's eternal. Now as you lie back, the night outside still humming with faint laughter and the scent of crushed petals, let yourself soften. Let your muscles release the last tension they held through the day. Imagine the flicker of firelight on a wall, the quiet murmur of someone telling a story in the corner, their voice slow, low, meant only for those who stay awake just a little longer. A maypole stands in the square. The ribbons flutter gently now in the cool breeze. The jester is quiet, his bells still. Somewhere, someone is washing mud off their knees. Somewhere else, someone is already crafting the next tale. And you're just here, breathing, safe, wrapped in the knowledge that for all its weirdness, for all its mess, the medieval world kept finding ways to dream. Close your eyes and picture a stage carved in wood, a puppet bowed mid-performance, a goat in a paper crown, a saint's finger tucked inside a velvet box, the absurdity and wonder of it all. And feel, even now, a small smile tug at your lips. Because you've survived the blood and the laughter, the jokes and the judgment, the riddles, the mud, the fire and the frost. You've danced with devils, eaten with ghosts, and watched a goose deliver divine judgment. So rest now. The show is over. For tonight, sweet dreams.